seems to be, we've been encapsulating them to do something, but it seems like we have a schizoid policy. I'm not sure what everybody wants Russia to do other than pull out of Ukraine. It seems like
they should probably give Crimea back and to stop arbitrarily recognizing separatist regions that don't have popular support in eastern Ukraine.
You think they're going to give Crimea back?
Anthony Fauci spread mass misinformation.
And that
wasn't really misinformation. That was developing information, right? Like as more information came.
Fauci, but name one.
Huh?
Yeah. No, I'm still gonna say what I was saying before.
Yeah. What did Fauci lie about?
He said masks work. And
so you think that masks don't work?
No.
Which is famously why surgeons don't use them.
Wait. We gotta let Parker respond. Parker hasn't talked that much. I want to let Parker talk.
I can send you multiple different peer-reviewed studies that show that they are effective against stopping the spread of COVID-19. What would you be basing that claim off of?
They are good at limiting the spittle, but they are not small enough to stop viral transmission.
How does coronavirus spread?
Welcome everybody to Friday's show. I appreciate everybody taking time out of their Fridays to do the hippy dippy round table. I appreciate everybody, including returning guest Sprouticus, who has come back after a short retirement. Where is it public information what we were doing? Can I comment on that?
It's public information.
Who was helping refugees from Afghanistan? Actually, do you want to talk a little bit about that if you wanted to for a second?
Yeah. So basically, the Afghanistan refugees that we evacuated from Afghanistan went to several different military bases. At that point in time, we then just made sure they went to the medical appointments, talked to FBI, talked to a bunch of other people, and then they eventually got resettled with sponsors. And recently, all the Afghanistani refugees or Afghan refugees were relocated to their sponsors from Fort McCoy. And so we cleaned up the base and then we headed home. So I'm back and I'm ready to get into this.
Happy to have you back. And unironically, good job. That's really a good thing you did. So
thank you.
Now we're going to go into the rules before we go around the room. But most of you should know the rules. You either have been longtime viewers and or participants at the Hippy Dippy Roundtable. First rule, of course, is you follow Twitch terms of service. That's extremely important as we all want to keep our jobs. We don't want to end up like Sansol, okay? Secondly, I want to make sure that if you're not talking and you're like typing or something, make sure to mute your mic, specifically Mythic. Next, no going after people's immutable characteristics, no throwing around slurs or anything like that. That means not going after people's race, not going after people's gender, and we do use people's preferred pronouns here. If you don't like that, then you can go on another program. I don't care what you do in your own shows, but this is my show, it's my platform, and that's a hard rule I have, okay? Other than that, let's say you are having a problem. You're in here and you're like, oh golly gee, I don't know how to engage in the free market of ideas. You know, I don't understand how to do this. Oh golly gee whiz, what do I do? Well, you've got a secret ticket you can use as a last resort. Please use it as a last resort, not a first resort. I know many of you do use it as a first resort. Raise your hand. I will type your name down on a notepad, and I'll make sure eventually we get around to you. Eventually, I make sure that you get a time to speak. Other than that, I want to let everybody at home know that unless somebody says otherwise, everybody on today's roundtable is not an expert on the issues we're going to be discussing unless they say otherwise, and you should get other sources and not take anything anyone says on this platform at face value. Do not get all your news and information from Twitch streamers. By God, please don't. That's a terrible, 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 terrible idea. Okay, so now we're going to go around and have everybody introduce themselves. Try to keep your introductions very short, 30 seconds or less. We're going to start in the top left-hand corner with Sparky.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aircraft Sparky. I am a nationalist conservative, believe in the Constitution, pretty much a free speech absolutist and a 2A absolutist as well. Yeah, looking forward to having a decent conversation tonight. Let's see what's going on.
Happy to have you back. Now I'm going to throw it over to Fabian.
All right, so I'm Scott from Fabian Liberty. We are a duo stream of anarcho-capitalists. I do a lot of the debates. We do some news reactions, a lot of fun look at constitutional projects and philosophy reading nights on Sunday, a little bit of everything for all your political needs if you want to hear what extreme libertarians think.
Wonderful. And I heard that you have a problem with the recent tag team championship decision.
Do I now? Yeah. We did a whole stream about it.
Did a whole stream about it. Oh, really? I didn't hear about it. No
I
one
know.
told
Well,
me.
that's because, you know, you're like 10 times larger than me, Dylan.
In multiple ways. Anyway, we're going to go over to Sprouticus.
Ooh.
Sprouticus, would you like to introduce
Let's
yourself?
find out.
Yeah,
Off
so
stream,
I
off
am
stream.
the Sprouticus. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter at the Sprouticus. I'm a constitutionalist conservative. I'm here to give my takes. If you like me or hate me, go give me a follow. If you hate me, definitely give me a subscription because it helps me out and you can hate me for longer. Now about Dylan's Hippy Dippy Tag Team Championship, I just want to give him the forewarning here that me and CTV are coming for those belts. All right, I just want to give you the forewarning.
Well, CTV's already Hippy Dippy champion. He's HDC champion.
Well, he could be tag team champion too.
I mean, there's nothing in the rules technically stopping that, correct?
So I just want to let you know we're coming for it.
Got you. What's your tag team name? Well, okay, so you're not really coming for it yet. Okay.
What? As CTV's working on that right now.
CTV's working on that right now. Okay, he can
Yep.
he can stay in the developmental stages then. Now throw it over to Lonerbox.
Hey, I'm Lonerbox. I'm a leftist, and I make YouTube videos and stream on Twitch.
Short and sweet. Mythic Politics, who is an alumni of the Hippy Dippy Recruitment Show, where we continue to make the stars of the future. Introduce yourself.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Yes, I'm a protege of Dylan. I'm going to be gigantic in this space, bigger than that other gentleman and Dylan combined, girth-wise, of course. I'm a political commentator, stream 7 days a week. I'm writing a book on political conspiracy theories, and I've been described as a lefty dirtbag commie.
Wonderful. We're now going to throw it over to our lovable friend, known for their TikToks and Jubilee, Parker.
Hey, what's up? My name is Parker. You can find me at ParkerCOL on TikTok. I just got permanently banned on my main, so that's where I'm at, literally for no reason. But I just do TikTok debates mainly about COVID and lots of other topics as well.
Wonderful. Yep. Parker believes COVID is fake. Now we're going to throw it over to Stardust.
Hello, I'm Stardust. I host a show called Chaos Cast once a week. I also cover politics, news, and I occasionally debate as well. Thank you for having me.
Love to have you back. And we're going to throw it over to Tiberius.
What's going on, everybody? If you don't know who I am Tiberius D. You might recognize me from the Mask Off podcast, where me, Connor Points, and a few other people get together every Friday, Saturday, Sunday to just basically have a weekend of fun. We did take this one off, obviously, to be on the Hippy Dippy, so it's good to be here. And I studied in political science and economics. I talked about geopolitics a lot. I can't wait to talk about Russia.
Excited. I would also like to say I believe Tiberius and Sprouticus also are both alumni of the Hippy Dippy Recruitment Show. Is that true?
I never went on the recruitment panel before I got to this panel.
Oh, got you. Okay, yeah, you wanted to make sure you got that out there. Okay, let's go into the first topic. The first topic is Russia and sanctions. Last week we discussed whether we should send aid and weapons to Ukraine. Well, now, what about the other end of the spectrum? What about, well, not the other end of the spectrum, but the other side of the coin? What about sanctions on Russia? Do you support sanctioning the Russian Federation for the invasion of Ukraine? We're going to start with Fabian Liberty.
So I'm kind of two minds on this. While I understand the need for sanctions with kind of like the situation that we have and the fact that we are a nation state with a lot of economic power and a bit of a responsibility to do certain things, what I don't seem to like about the way that we're engaging in sanctions is more about the rhetoric around them as opposed to sanctions themselves. You know, I feel that sanctions should be something that is short-termed and tied to a goal that we're looking for, right? You know, a short-term, very strong sanction that says, you know, these sanctions will be lifted once peace talks occur and a treaty is signed and you guys stop doing what you're doing. And instead, what we're doing is we're seeing these sanctions and we're seeing the cathedral of the media and the corporate state kind of use these sanctions as a means of apologizing for COVID restrictions, damage on the economy, Biden's horrendous domestic policy, and the way that he's destroyed the economy and destroyed oil and natural gas with so many of his recent policies, as well as his executive orders from day one. And the thing is that, you know, we've seen what sanctions do in the past, right? When we had sanctions against Russia, against Crimea, you know, we saw that it affected the Russian GDP about 1 to 1.5% loss in GDP. And in countries, with the exception of Latvia, that bordered Russia, we saw 10 to 15% GDP losses. So what these sanctions do when they're long-term and not tied to a goal is directly damage the Ukrainian people as well as other people that are in that region that are trading with them, do very little damage to Russia, and become this kind of smoke and mirrors trick that the West and the EU and the media gets to use to blame bad domestic policy on sanctions. And so I'm for the sanctions, but they really need to be tied to something, and we need to be careful about the way that we punish individual people in other countries and our own citizens with these sanctions.
Sparky?
So I'm almost on track with what Fabian said there. Scott's pretty smart on this one. But I also want to add on to this. Look, I do support the idea of sanctioning. I think that generally doing blanket sanctions across the entire nation is actually not going to really help all that much. In fact, every time we've seen extreme sanctions happen for extended period of times, well, it usually goes wrong. I'm looking at Germany and I'm looking at Japan for prime examples of that. I think the idea of sanctioning Putin and most of their oligarchs immediately would be a better idea than basically isolating them. When you do complete global isolation, all you're going to do is give them nothing else to lose, and we may see some escalations based on that.
Okay, now we're going to throw it over to... Let's change it up, throw it over to Loaderbox.
Okay. Yeah, sanctions are really, really rough. I don't really I have any sympathy for people who are watching the ruble crash and celebrating it, and watching like ordinary Russians, many of whom are liberal opponents of Putin, suffering for something that they oppose themselves. Unfortunately, it does seem like one of the only things we can do. I think it's just the problem with them is that they're not. There doesn't seem to be that much cohesion on like what they're trying to achieve. Like Fabian said, there hasn't been like any coordination recently with the EU and US over like, if you stop bombing, we'll lift this chunk of the sanctions. If you stop shooting, if you come out of this region. The ones that are targeted at the oligarchs and their technology, the tech ban I think is very good because it's targeting people who are motivated to keep the war going, and it's also targeting things like it's making them harder to source components for military tech and things like that. Yeah, I really wish that this kind of bandwagon would stop. I don't really know why banning like OnlyFans in Russia is going to help anyone, or like private companies just kind of wanting to keep a good rep by arbitrarily just like stopping business. I think it's kind of ridiculous. But yeah, I think it's all we've got, and we're in a very unique position right now where the global economy is big enough that they maybe could have an effect, but definitely needs to be done in a more pointed way.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it now over to Sprouticus.
All right, so I think that the sanctions on Russia are a good thing. I think that anything we can do to try and decrease Russia's influence or to decrease Russia's ability to go further into Ukraine is a good thing. So far, we've taken out their oil and gas exportation. We have taken them off of SWIFT, which is a huge part of it, making them go to CIS, and CIS is absolutely not anything near SWIFT. CIS has 76 direct participants, and 75 of them are in China. One is in Hong Kong. And so you're going to see a lot. It's going to be a lot harder for Russia to make transactions money wise. I think that this has been an overwhelmingly good thing. And I think that it should have happened sooner.
I'm not that surprised that Russia is cis. I didn't expect them to be trans. Gonna throw it over to Mythic Politics.
As far as the question whether we approve of the sanctions or what we think about it, I look at this as an extension of the 2014 sanctions. So I think when you look at the longitudinal effects of sanctions, they have less. If they're used as a punctuated strike towards a specific diplomatic means, they seem to be effective. For what they're trying to do with them now, when trying to circumvent an already existing military action, I don't think there's much precedent for that working. And if anything, the severity of these ones, I think, are going to exacerbate existing economical splits between the East and Western blocks. And it's going to specifically, probably paradoxically, foment a relationship in between China and Russia. It's probably the opposite of what the West wants. It's good to give China an opportunity to become cozier with Russia as they find different and novel ways to circumvent sanctions that have been going on a long time.
Okay, I'm going to throw it now over to Tiberius.
Yeah, so I'm going to divide this into two. The first part is that do I believe in the sanctions? Yes. Overall, is that this actually was what NATO and the American empire, if you want to call it that, was actually built upon. It was to build out to contain and defeat the Soviet Union. We kept it around after the Cold War just in case we decided we wanted to use it again. And it's actually doing what it's supposed to do outside of defending Ukraine. And that was last week's topic, so we won't get there. But the other side of this is that it's weird and ironic when we get to this on the open, in that both Russia and NATO's worst fears were validated in the last couple of months. Russia invaded a sovereign nation, which is exactly what NATO is supposed to do or stop. And on the other side of that is that the Russians are going, hey, NATO literally just economically tried to shut us down, which is exactly what we were afraid of happening. It's kind of weird because we've gone full circle for everybody. I'll get to that in the open. Thank you.
Stardust?
Yeah, I support the sanctions. The sanctions, part of the reason why we have sanctions is to make an already very expensive thing, war, even more expensive. I mean, for example, the top Russian imports for 2020 were machinery, appliances, electronics, chemical products. These are things that are going to be very, very painful for them in the war. And we've already seen them try to go to China, and China has actually turned them down in providing machinery parts to them. So I believe somebody else in this panel said that China, this gives China the opportunity to get close with them. I actually don't think that's the case. We've seen China actually kind of reverse what their public statements are regarding this. And then also it's built into the rules of the sanction that the sanctions go away as soon as Russia leaves Ukraine. So it seems like pretty comprehensive to me. I think they're pretty effective. And initially, yeah, it looked like, oh, what are these really going to do? But we can see that just looking at the markets, looking at the ruble, how much their economy has tanked from these sanctions.
Okay, now we're going to throw it over to Parker.
I definitely agree with the sanctions. I think that they were beneficial for at least getting Russia to do or be able to stop Russia from engaging in any more conflict in that. I do think that we need to take into account how these sanctions are affecting the people, not necessarily just like the overall effect of them. The overall effect has been great, but as like they said previously, I do think that we should make sure that they're targeted to make sure that it's specific to we're getting something out of it, which is also laid out in the sanctions, which I think is beneficial. But I do very much support 100% the sanctions on the Kremlin and oligarchs. I think that they are more beneficial than ones that would affect people, of course.
Okay, so that is all the opening statements. Does anybody want to open this up?
The removal from SWIFT, that could actually be interpreted as an act of war. The more you isolate a country, we've seen this historically. When we isolated Japan and we took them away from being able to purchase lumber and oil, they bombed Pearl Harbor.
Do you understand that? Do you understand that any sanctions can be interpreted as an act of war?
Yes. But
okay, so sanctions in themselves can be interpreted as an act of war.
So what would you like the alternative to be? Would you like us to actually...
Okay, one at a time. Okay, so Sprout asked him a question, so I want to make sure Sparky can respond to that question. Okay. And then we'll throw it over to you, Star.
Cutting an entire country off from the world economy when we have really intermingled the entire world with the economy, doing that is only going to solidify them in their stance. Look, you think Putin just did this invasion all nimbly-bimbly, just woke up one morning and said, you know what, fuck it. I'm feeling a little cute today. I think I'll invade Russia. I'll invade Ukraine. No, he actually thought all this out. He knew sanctions were coming. He fortified himself and all of his little buddies. And look, he doesn't give two shits if the citizens actually do anything because he rules with a freaking iron fist. All it's going to do is completely divide the world. Look, we've already got Brazil, we've got Mexico, we've got all these different countries actually saying, look, we're kind of with Russia on this one. I don't agree with what Russia did. I think our sanctions, the way we had them targeted, we didn't go after the individuals. In fact, have we even sanctioned Putin himself? Because I know we sanctioned a lot of the big oligarchs around him, but for the longest, they didn't even want to touch Putin. If you make it to where the Russian people feel like they have no other alternative, all they're going to do is balkanize, and they are just going to
join this siding with
Wait,
Russia.
1 second. Quick question: is Nimbly Blimbly an official Russian military term, or like?
I don't know.
Okay,
I
just
don't
wanted to-
speak commie, so
Got it. Okay, I just want to check.
Yeah.
Sprout, you wanted to respond to that, and then we're gonna bring it over to Stardust and Tiberius eventually.
So yeah, according to businessstandard.com, Mexico declines to join Russia sanctions and seeks to stay on peaceful terms. That is
yes, they declined to join the sanctions.
Because you seek to stay on peaceful terms does not mean that they side with Russia. It just means that we're going to try and stay neutral with this, because the United States initially didn't join World War II, but they weren't. They were just trying to stay neutral, but they weren't like in favor of what Nazi Germany was doing. Those are two completely different things, my man.
Putin was sanctioned as well, by the way.
Okay. Yeah. See, I wasn't sure if that happened yet. Thank you.
Stardust.
I am not sure that. I guess my only question would be, what would you prefer if sanctions are interpreted as an act of war? What do you think would be a better thing that would not be interpreted as an act of war?
NMC, not my concern. Look the other way, not our problem.
Look the other way. Okay.
Not our problem.
Okay. All right.
So is America no longer the land of the free?
America is the land of the free, not Ukraine.
So if we take the not my problem or not my concern take, which whatever you want to do, my man. If we take that take, should we just left our troops in Ukraine? Or because if we take our troops out, then it's becoming our problem because we're deciding to leave Ukraine.
Troops in Ukraine.
We did prior to Russia invading.
Yes, we had Green Berets there. Yes, they were training their.
We had
their
more
army.
than Green Berets.
Okay, guy.
I mean, do you want me to go back and look how much troops we had in Ukraine before we moved them to Poland?
Go for it, man. We didn't have
We'll get
military
stats. We'll get
footprint
stats
there. We were training people over there. We had an agreement to train their people and to arm them. But as soon as Russia moved in, we moved our people out, and that's completely fine. Not our problem.
Let's see.
How many Americans live in Ukraine? I'm just going to guess there are at least a few, right?
Stunned.
Who have built lives in Ukraine.
They made a choice.
They didn't make a choice to get invaded, did they?
No. They made a choice to live in somewhere that's not America. Therefore, consequences come with choices.
What about students, exchange students?
What about them?
They made a choice, Stardust.
Oh, okay. They made a
Not
choice.
to get invaded.
Right.
Just to be clear, they didn't make a choice to get invaded.
You're so, you know what? So right. I Sparky over here is just nailing it on the head. Just amazing. So.
Sprout, I got about a battalion that was over there all together. I want to, I want to sidestep a little bit because I do want to hit the primary thesis that Sparky was getting. Is this an act of war or just in the sanctions? In a way, yes. Like we can do the parallels and analogies to World War II, but overall, is that ever since the advent of nuclear weapons, and particularly mutually assured destruction back in the 50s, is that everything's kind of on the table now. We do some intelligence shit on the regular that used to be acts of war that would start wars, but everyone just sweeps it under the rug, throws it under the table. Economically, militarily, like as long as you're not actually having the nuclear powers go at each other face to face in a military confrontation, we have seen diplomatic, economic, and military movements on a level that we haven't, or that we just don't understand since 1945. It's strange, but basically everything's on the table. So is it an act of war? Yes, but in a way, in the theater of geopolitics, this war's been going since 45 with the start of the Cold War, and even though it took a break in the 2000s, it's kind of back.
It's a very quiet panel.
I think we were waiting for a response from Aircraft Sparky, but he's muted.
Okay. So what response do you want? We don't really have any obligation to do anything for Ukraine. I know that you just came from a really tough business trip. We're not going to call it deployment because we don't deploy inside of our own country.
No, there is such thing as that, but keep going.
Okay. You don't sit there and do things Like, pick fights with people just because, hey, someone's buying arms from us. Look, I have no problem. If Russia decides to go to war with us tomorrow, cool. We'll fight them and we'll meet them on the battlefield and yada yada yada. We'll probably fucking demolish them. We'll take some pretty big casualties in the deal. But why should the U.S. The U.S. is not the world police, and for some reason, everyone thinks it is. Maybe it's because that's the way we've acted for the past, I don't know, 40, 50 years. We need to stop doing that. We intervene in way too many things. And look, every time everyone on these panels talk about, oh, we need to intervene. Well, you're talking about soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that are going to be doing it. You're not going to be doing it. If you'd like to get off your dumpy ass out of your living room, bedroom, or whatever it is you are at and do it, go fucking do it. Look, join the Reddit army, the they, thems that are going over there. Have fun. But for Christ's sakes, stop trying to push American service members into doing things that are not what they signed up for. They signed up to support and defend the Constitution of
But
the
we're
United States
not.
and defend America.
These
Yeah,
are
Kasparky,
sanctions.
Yeah,
do you
These
know
are
how-
sanctions. This is not anything to do with American service members. This is literally like economic sanctions. What are you talking about?
Oh, look, you cut them off to a point to where they feel desperate, and you'll see exactly what happened in Germany in 1939. You'll see the exact same
If you're
thing
going to bring
that
up
happened
Japan
with-
again, Japan wanted to bomb us before we did that.
Yes,
Japan
and when
wanted,
we took them,
they were going to do that before we even did that.
when we took away their access to oil and lumber,
It doesn't
that
matter.
was just
They
the
were going
final
to do that
frickin'
anyways.
straw.
That was
Really?
not that was not the reason Japan bombed us. Japan bombed us because they wanted to take control of the Pacific. They wanted every single island, and that included Hawaii. What Japan
Right.
didn't know is that when they bombed Hawaii, that it woke up a sleeping monster. Okay. Hitler was
actually knew that.
Hitler was probably not very happy at all when he learned that Japan bombed Pearl Harbor because he knew what would happen. Japan did not know that was going to happen. They wanted to control the Pacific.
Yeah, they fucked up and found out. In fact, I believe it was Admiral Yamamoto that said, I believe we woke a sleeping giant. Yes.
Yeah, Yamamoto didn't want to
Yeah.
Japan was essentially forced to attack America at a certain point. He was really didn't want to attack America.
Yeah.
Kirkhoff Sparky, why do you think countries like Ukraine over the last kind of 6 to 8 years have fought quite hard to be more integrated with economies like America and Europe rather than Russia?
Because they're more expansive, they're more prosperous.
Partly as well because in 1994, the United States signed the Budapest Memorandum, like pledging to uphold Ukrainian democracy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
But
do you
that
think
isn't.
it's worth
but-
reciprocating those terms?
So upholding democracy means that we participate in certain things. Doesn't mean that we go and defend them.
We're not,
There's a big difference. If there was a defense treaty, that'd be a different animal. But this
So
is
how
not the
it's-
case.
so how do we uphold their democracy since their democracy is not really being upheld right now, right?
What, are we supposed to do everything for them?
I didn't say everything. We're talking about sanctions.
Well, look,
I feel like that's
I-
like the least you can do, isn't it?
So no, we could do much less. Trust me.
Like what? Send them helmets? I'm
No.
joking. Go on.
We could do what the Obama administration did and send them blankets, and that's it. Yeah, we sent blankets and food. That's what we did around 2008. That was a big part of the Ukraine policy of the Democrats, is we weren't going to arm them at all. We started arming them later down the road, and now
In 2008, why did they need? Okay, they weren't being invaded in 2008.
Yes, they were invaded in 2014.
So what would you do, Loner?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, if you're going to uphold the treaty, right? Like that means we have
Well,
to.
it's not even a treaty. It's a
If we want to uphold the agreement, right? Then in order to uphold the agreement, we have to say, well, we've already signed an agreement. So to secure the territorial integrity of Ukraine as well, right? So it would be impossible for us to be a part of any peace negotiation that, let's say, gave the Donbass region its independence and simultaneously uphold that treaty. So if we're invoking that treaty as like a thing that we can't go against, I'm curious if you're doing it just like rhetorically to Aircraft Sparky, or if like you believe that like we have to uphold that treaty perfectly, then that means that like in no way, shape, or form can we negotiate with Russia on any part of independence in the Donbass region, and instead we have to be willing to fight Russia to uphold the territorial integrity of Ukraine as well.
Well, I don't really know why the Donbass. I feel like is maybe not the best example because I don't think there's ever been a majority in Donbass who want to be part of Russia. So
Yeah, but you're
like-
sidestepping the point, which was why I was just asking about the treaty, right?
yeah.
Like,
So the
the
point is
territorial
like,
integrity.
within reason, obviously. So you can't put boots on the ground or the no-fly zone because that's like going to be nuclear war. But yeah, you do what you can, and sanctions, as well as I guess sending arms, are kind of two of the things that you can do. I mean, the sanctions have got
Well, I
some
think
specific problems
what
with them,
aircraft
yeah.
Sparky might be somewhat, and I'm not trying to insult you too much, but I'm just being honest, like a little bit ineloquently saying, is that there is economic warfare, and there's a gradual kind of play. Like, obviously, boots on the ground is kind of a hard line for a lot of countries and nations, and definitionally maybe for some opinions of the American people or for certain treaties, but there is certainly a gradation of warfare, and I would say that we're likely engaged in a form of warfare, economic warfare, when we're engaging in extremely harsh sanctions. Obviously, SWIFT is being kind of overblown because the Russian banks that deal with the gas are going to be not a part of SWIFT. So, it's kind of like a half measure here. The O0 inner circle of Putin's oligarchy, somehow haven't really fully had their accounts and assets and Western properties fully seized. So, I mean, there is some half
Wait.
measures to some degree.
What do you think Swift does?
Shut
What
up,
do you think Swift
Fabio.
does?
Okay, I'm done hearing you talk. Okay, I'm sorry, but yeah,
Okay.
we should be what's it called? Going by the treaty. I'm sorry, we should just be doing that. We should be defending Ukraine's sovereignty. When we are not doing that, when we're not doing economic
It was
sanctions
not
and
a
provide.
treaty.
Shut up. Okay. Well, anyways, treaty or not
Fucking
treaty,
idiot.
whatever. You're an
Memorandum,
idiot.
you know.
You're the one who's been talking like a
treaties have
fucking
to be
idiot this
approved by
entire time, bro.
Congress.
I'm just
You
fucking
don't-
stunned. I'm fucking stunned at what you're saying. Okay, let me finish what I'm gonna
Understood.
say. Okay, we should send weapons. We should continue with the economic sanctions because if we don't, they're going to be already even more fucked. We've already got millions of refugees coming out of Ukraine. They're just completely leveling it. They're making it completely unlivable. They're destroying infrastructure, which is like the number one cause of death in
That's
war,
what
not
war
even like the
does.
war itself. I'm sorry. I support it. I support 100% us going in there, providing weapons and doing economic sanctions. And if we really need to, which I'm hoping we don't need to, but if we need to, then maybe we will provide forces. But that's like a last resort, right? That's it.
Towards what end, Stardust? Let's say the sanctions didn't prevent this from happening. Somebody might look at this and say the increasing economic sanctions after the Crimea sort of continued a series of isolation from the West, which has asphyxiated Russia and made them desperate. So I'm wondering what the
How did it
punctual way
make them desperate to invade Ukraine?
to
What- in
increase their
what way were they
self-determination.
Okay.
To isolate them from the vicissitudes of whether the West wants to decide whether they want to live and die. So I'm curious about when you strengthen these sanctions that haven't worked in the past, it's going to continue to exacerbate them, make them feel isolated, and make them dynamic. It's going to probably radicalize and exacerbate the existing dynamic within Russia. There's already crackdowns on people. I think Putin has made himself basically coup-proof by having basically the police go and crack down on any kind of dissent. So I'm wondering if it's not an interstitial step into boots on the ground, what is the point of the sanctions unless you're just saying that is what you want? You want to do this to destabilize. So when you send troops in, it's more effective.
The point of sanctions, war, as we know, war is a very expensive endeavor. The point of sanctions is to make that war even more expensive, to make it even less incentivized for the people who are doing the war. It is meant to put pressure on the Russian government. And these are all things that we can see happening in real time. These sanctions have been the most effective sanctions I've ever seen. Again, you can look at how many days the Moscow exchange has been closed. The ruble has fallen enormously. These economic sanctions, and while I don't support all of these like individual things, I think in general these economic sanctions are incredibly effective at putting a lot of pressure on Russia, we're already seeing like they are realizing that their military equipment is not up to par. And now with the sanctions, they're having trouble getting machinery from other countries, and they can't even get it from China now. So
Mhm.
yes, what is also part of those sanctions? Is that as soon as they withdraw from Ukraine, those sanctions end. That's it.
So,
That
what do
is
you think
part of
they
it.
I
It is
also want to
built into
know,
it.
Mythic, you were
but they
saying
Wait,
don't.
wait,
that
wait,
But they
stop,
don't
stop,
end
wait.
though.
Okay.
They do.
It's
They
like,
do.
guys, sorry. There's multiple
It's
people.
part of it.
Guys,
It's in
hey,
page 4
Stardust.
of this.
Stardust.
Sorry.
There's multiple people talking at once, and so I want to just have an order here. So Mythic and Stardust is engaging, so we're gonna go that. We're gonna go to Sparky, then to Loner in that order. Okay? Dope. Just want everybody to know that.
Okay, above and beyond, like,
Sorry, time. Sorry.
I'm just curious about the mechanism that there's an allusions to the sanctions ending, but that there's nothing like no key agreement that's saying that at this time we're going to withdraw. Would that include fully withdrawing out of Donbass, not wrecking the provisional the districts? I'm wondering about that. And then not only that, there's also the existing ones from Crimea. So this is the sanctions are just the cherry on the top of the cupcake of the existing economic isolation of Russia.
Well, this is specifically about the Russian
Yeah.
troops moving into Ukraine. That's what like so the first round of sanctions that happened were directly to stop what they had done 16 days ago of moving troops into Ukraine. It was directly. It wasn't to do with Donbass. It wasn't to do with Crimea. This was a separate round of sanctions, the ones that we're just recently seeing. Now you can maybe argue that I think. Maybe last week, I think there was a new round of sanctions that they didn't have that pointed goal where and then some people are speculating the goal might be regime change. I don't think I would agree with that. But yeah, no, the goal was pretty specific.
Sanctions are
Mythic,
that once they
I
meet
also,
the criteria, they're not sanctioned anymore.
yeah, Mythic, I also want to ask you another question. You said that maybe the sanctions led up to this from Crimea, but how far back do you want to go? Do you think Crimea was annexed because of sanctions or what?
No, I that's good pushback. No, I don't necessarily think that. And to be honest, I don't know a lot about the pre-existing conditions that led to the annexation of Crimea, and just sort of in the last couple months have looked into that and what's meant for the geopolitical strata in Europe. But what I'm looking at broadly as is sort of like, here's my thing. As a communist, I look at this, and to me, this is all seems like an inevitable play out of like neoliberalism and the liberalizing of markets post World War II in Europe, and the Iron Curtain, or the isolation of the Marshall Plan, and the Iron Curtain on the other side. And that divide hasn't really ever been ameliorated. It seems like NATO and specifically the U.S. has exacerbated any sort of trade relations with Germany and Russia that we've been able to. And this is just the gentleman earlier was talking about the gradation of war. I feel like this is part of a gradation of isolation. So when asked like, if not sanctions, what? I would say actual diplomacy. And if neoliberalism is the default go-to modality, then we have to integrate with Russia economically in the same way that we have with China, or else these things are going to continue to happen.
Well, one of the problems was the economic integration for Hungary. Hungary has the infrastructure and the economy to do like a balancing act between Russia and the EU. Ukraine didn't have that. So Ukraine was in a position where they were giving about a quarter of their exports went to the EU, another quarter went to the Eurasian customs zone. But their incomes, the average incomes in Ukraine before 2013 were like stagnant since like 1989. It was like a really poor performing economy, which is why it was in their interest and why it was so popular for them to go with the EU, because you play the two off against each other, you get a better deal from one. I don't know why like neoliberalism plays much of a factor here, because like if you were talking neoliberalism as in what, like internationalizing and growing trade blocks and privatization, well, Russia does that as well. It's just that like you can say the whole like trade compromise in terms of neoliberalism, but like compromise wasn't working for the Ukrainian people. It was about them as well as just the EU and the Eurasian customs, right?
Well, so there's a problem with this, right? And this is, I think, twofold. I mean, there's a ton of other things. Obviously, we could go into history lessons over, the next 1,000 hours. But one of the two things I'd like to highlight is, first, Russia has always sought a kind of a buffer zone between the West and itself. I mean, this was why they were in Afghanistan in the 80s, right? They've constantly attempted to do this. And when you look at countries like Latvia, for example, that are basically, doing whatever the EU wants to do, and they've basically been absorbed as part of the as basically been absorbed into that culturally and economically. And then you see what's occurring in Ukraine, where Ukraine is heavily involved with American companies, heavily doing a lot of its economic training, and then also the Donbass region is a complete total fucking mess that nobody really understands because there's so much fucking propaganda on both sides. But obviously what we do know is that there are people dying there, and there is a highly ethnic Russian population there, and Russia is like seeking this buffer zone. And when you say, well, we should be doing diplomacy and like this war is wrong, obviously, starting a surprise war like it's the early game in a fucking Civ match is like a fucking problem. But at the same time, when you have the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, is shutting down news agencies that are too pro-Russian and has individual political, political people, and has some level of political prisoners, depending upon how invested in Russian media or how invested in Western media you are. It's hard to tell, at least on that regard. And you do have issues occurring in this region. How are they supposed to engage with this in a diplomatic perspective when their own news media agencies are banned in the country, right? Like they're kind of in between a rock and a hard place. And what they did is obviously morally wrong, and we should condemn them for it. But
What
at the same
media
time, like,
are you talking about?
there was several media sources that were shut down. I don't have the exact names of each one.
When exactly?
Was one of them RT?
I mean, no, it wasn't RT. This happened before any of that stuff, and this occurred. New York Times did a whole article about it. Actually, it's pretty interesting. News.
What's
media
interesting though
site.
is
We can't give you a second to
Nobody-
look that up. We'll throw it over to Sparky.
look.
Yeah, you found it.
Oh, and
a lot of
wait,
people.
actually, Sparky, before we throw it over to you, I almost did. Well, actually, it's Sparky then Tiberius. So Sparky, sorry.
So a lot of people are taking Putin at his word that he's there for the Donetsk region and stuff. No, he's there for minerals. Let's be honest. Ukraine is rich with titanium, uranium, graphite, mercury, copper, manganese, and stuff like that. And it all happens to be right around the areas he was talking about. And if you actually listen to Putin's speech, he was talking about history and stuff because the historic capital of the Rus Empire is Kiev anyway. Look, he's not looking at just making a buffer. He's using that as an excuse. If you look at the actual region, the region there, and you look at the natural resources there that are in abundance, 20%, 20% of the world's graphite exists in Ukraine. Titanium, they have 15 sites for titanium. 4 of them are currently being mined. He is in it for the minerals. He is doing this all for the minerals. You don't go to war. You don't risk lives for nothing. He's working. He's trying to prevent the West from getting access to titanium, because one of the things that have actually kept the Russian Federation afloat post-Soviet era has been the sale of titanium to the West. And with the Ukraine cozying up to the West, this is actually giving a way to cut out Russia. So look, it's you're thinking, you're listening to the rhetoric and following it. It's all a joke. Everything you see on the news, the majority of what you're seeing on the news right now is a farce. For Christ's sakes, people actually thought the ghost of Kiev was a real thing. I mean,
Yeah,
come
I'm
on.
just going to
just
ask
real quick.
Fabian something because
I just got it. So it's,
I do want to confirm Ghost of Kiev is real, and I'm the shill of Kiev. Okay, we
there you
we work.
So
in
that would
tandem.
be there'll be 112 Ukraine, News One, and ZIK television channels owned and operated by. Oh my god, I can't remember. I'd have to look again at the article, but basically they used allegations of treason, not a trial. They wasn't convicted, to be able to shut down news agencies from 2 investors of that were Russian investors in the media. Now, were they biased
only-
media sources? Probably, right? I mean, obviously, right? But when you start shutting down press in your country that goes against you, and you start to realize that diplomatic negotiations become more and more difficult when you have an ethnically Russian population in one area, far more population that tends to lean more Ukrainian in another. There's accusations of a lot of things going on. Again, this is the fog of war, so we don't
Okay.
really know.
So,
Fabian,
so I guess
Craft.
my question would be, so these are Ukraine shutting down TV channels owned by like Russia friendly people.
Mhm.
So
Well, there was allegations of treason, but
okay,
again, not a conviction.
I'm just
So not innocent
confused.
until proven guilty.
Fabian, do you think Churchill was wrong to ban fascist literature in Britain without any like legal precedent
I
during the
think
Second World
banning
War?
communist, fascist, socialist literature in all of its forms is wrong.
During the
So you
war as
think
well, right?
so you think during World
Yes.
War II they should
Okay.
have let Germany propaganda just spread across Europe?
Yes.
That was my first question. It's okay. I had another one as well. You keep on pointing to the ethnically Russian majority in Donbass and Luhansk. It's worth pointing out, just in case anyone needs to hear it. None of these regions have ever had majority support for secession or for like anything. I think
No, they
the best that
haven't.
they've
You're
had is
right.
they support federalization or just like autonomy, but within Ukraine. Secession has never been like particularly popular in any of these regions. All right.
Okay,
I mean,
I'll let Fabian respond quick,
Go
but I
ahead.
want to throw it to Tiberius. Want to respond to that?
when I'm talking about ethnically, I'm talking about, this region has an overwhelming majority of people where they believe that Russian is their first language. They're very culturally Russian, and they're facing, the UN reports hundreds of dead like every year in this region, supposedly from being attacked from eastern Ukraine. Like, it's not a good situation. Similar things can be said about the other side in Crimea, right? And people will say, oh, well, they shut off their water, and it's like, well, these people voted to have their water shut off, right? Like, it's not like we're. I think so many people are looking at this trying to empathize, and I totally understand empathy, like trying to have that empathy, but they're trying to think about the situation through the lens of the world that they live in, without realizing that the world that they live in is totally fucking different, right? Like, they're not.
I know you're not referring to the referendum in Crimea in 2014 where you're
In what
saying they
regards?
voted. You said they voted to have their water turned off. I know you're not referring to the referendum, the Crimea referendum in 2014. I know you're not referring to that.
No, what's this? I thought that was 2016. Let me look it up again.
Well, the referendum was 2014.
Well,
The
No,
Crimea
the
was
water shut
Oh,
off.
the what?
Crimea
Yes,
was
but you
annexed
said
for a
they
warm
voted.
water
You
port
said they
for
voted
Russia.
for it.
So after
said
they
they
were
voted
annexed,
for it.
I don't really know if any vote counts after they've been annexed, right? Like,
And
Let me
the
go back.
Crimea
Wait,
referendum
quick,
is
I gotta quiz.
widely-
I gotta quiz the room. Does anybody in here know what the two options on the 2014 referendum were?
yep, it was either the 1912 thing or it was be with Russia. But so neither result would have got them back with Ukraine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
neither there was
Yeah.
not even an option to go back to Ukraine.
Not even to
And
mention the water
this-
supply, if you know about that one as well, like because that water supply is a canal of fresh water that leads from mainland Ukraine into Crimea, a canal that was incidentally built under Khrushchev. Like, and the reason it was able to be built was because Khrushchev transferred Crimea over to Ukraine. So when Russia annexes that territory and then starts putting their naval, like their ships into that canal, which is very threatening to Ukraine, of course they're going to close it. Yeah, they're not going to supply
this-
water to a region that's not their country. Yeah.
This referendum in 2014 was globally and widely seen as an illegal referendum and was not accepted globally. Even though Russia wanted to be accepted globally, it was not accepted globally. So I'm confused as to why you're saying the Crimeans voted to have their water turned off. If you can supply anything for that claim, that would be great.
The whole reason why Crimea was annexed to
Wait,
begin with by Russia
one
was
second.
so they'd have
Wait.
access to the Black Sea.
Well, okay. Yes, but I want to throw it
True.
over to Tiberius.
Well, they
Tiberius has
already
been-
had access.
I'm gonna
No,
give-
no. There's
Fine.
shipyards over there that they needed. That's why they're going to take Odessa too, because it's the only one that can handle their deep water vessels.
Appreciate it. I've got 3 notes here that I want to just kind of bang through here real quick. Number 1, what's the point of the sanctions? The phase 1 sanctions and the phase 2 sanctions. That's largely the SWIFT SWIFT system sanctions. You're talking levels of sanctioning that could actually force civilizational collapse. Like literally, the goal of those two for the Russian people is that you have red lines again, like you had back in 1990 and 91, to where people are waiting 4 or 5 hours just to get bread. It doesn't matter how popular you are or how much you are an oil exporting dictatorship. If your people don't get food, they don't support you in any way. They will tear your ass down. So that is goal number 1. Now, if the phase 5 sanctions come in, that goes out against the institution as a whole, because we're talking about an oil exporting dictatorship that is very happy just to turn people into Swiss cheese. But if you go after their main revenue source that actively keeps that, the institution funded, that's a whole other story. Now, the big question here is, number one, looking into the spring, yeah, you can probably tell Europeans, hey, we're going to use less oil and gas from Russia. But what happens come a year from now when we're going back into the winter? Like, this is a big sell that I'm not 100% is going to happen. Number two, just to show actually how important Ukraine is for Sparky's comments, whenever the Cold War was going on, 20% of the U.S. nuclear arsenal was pointed by itself. This area is incredibly strategically important. It is one of the biggest producers of fertilizer. It's the second biggest grain producer in all of Europe.
The basket of Europe.
Yeah, the Dnieper River Valley is one of the most economically active zones within Eastern Europe as a whole. Like, this literally is the homeland of the Kievan Rus. The last thing, though, what is Russia's actual objectives? Because I don't think anyone's actually even talking about that in the media. I think the true objective is they want NATO to go back to the 1994. This is the one thing I actually do believe Putin on when he says this, when he tells his people that he believes that the Russians were lied to. He believes that NATO is an existential threat to the Russian state of being, and he's kind of right in that. And he wants to push NATO all the way back to where the Poles aren't members anymore. What's the plan to do that? From what looks like to me, the Ukrainian refugee wave that is forming out of this is the actual true strategic goal of this operation. Is that he wants to do what he did in Syria, where he sent a million refugees screaming into Europe, that basically made Germany go from a stable nation to having its AfD, its far right wing party, triple in size in less than a year. This is actually Russia's master plan. He wants to send 5 million Ukrainians screaming into Poland and Germany, and if they can't keep this ship together, that's probably the end of NATO. That's the actual goal.
That sounds suspiciously like something out of a comic book. I don't.
This is
his goals are like, he has actually stated goals as well. They said they wanted neutrality for Ukraine. They wanted to finish the demilitarization of the country. The ambiguity about that is very concerning. And then he wants the Crimea and the Donbass and Luhansk region to be recognized.
Yes. He has made those points. However, if you actually look, since about 2007, he's been very, very clear that he thought the expansion of NATO was an existential threat to the Russian Federation. And he's been gearing up. Like, literally after he started beating this drum, we saw the invasion of Georgia the following year. He waited a little while because they militarily performed like shit in Georgia. Well, they absolutely beat the hell out of the Georgians. Is that the Russian army doctrine was centered around corps commanders and army commanders. These are literally 3- and 4-star generals. They figured that they needed to move that down to at least division commanders, which are major generals, or brigadier generals, which are 1 or 2 star. That it's a lot more local on the field. We saw that actually very successful in 2014 because with the Little Green Men, that was a very smash and sweep operation. But it looks like they tried to do that again here in 2022. And the big thing is it's not going the way they planned it. This is why we're seeing these weird things where it's 2 weeks into an invasion and Kiev is still holding it. Russians are not playing by their normal doctrine at all.
I don't think that they're actually trying to take Kiev, because I mean, if they really wanted to take it,
they would have flattened it.
They would, yeah.
They would flatten it like Grozny. Like, if the Russians really wanted to, they would turn it into Grozny.
I mean, look, the Chechens are probably the ones that's given Russia their biggest black eye in recent history. And I severely doubt they really want to see the Ukrainians do that. If they really wanted to sweep in, they would be doing it completely different. They would do it via the way we went into Iraq and everything else.
Can I ask you a question, Sparky? Sorry, I'm not supposed to do it, but I ask you a question. Why did the Russian government use VDV paratroopers to try to take the Hostomel airport with basically no support? Then they got slaughtered if they didn't try to take it on the first few days.
Why did they drop them at 5,000 feet? Why do we really know they were VDV? See, that's a deal.
Yeah, we
do.
Just
because you do? You
do.
You speak Russian. You understand all the unit patches and everything. I'm just asking.
Yes, I do.
I don't know that, and I don't trust anything coming out of the media right now.
But
Because-
Well,
there
what's
was
the point in talking to you?
there's video
What's
footage.
the point in asking?
Jeez,
There's video
dude.
I don't
footage.
trust
Wait,
any
stop,
reports,
stop,
alright?
everybody, stop. I'm not gonna have everybody pile. I'm just interested. If there was video footage of 34 helicopters, this is not like fake video footage, going to the airport and bombing it before the paratroopers
They
were
tried
dropped.
to take it. No, they tried to. So they did try to secure it. If they really wanted to do it right, they would have done it completely differently.
Yeah, because they're incompetent. So the thing is, they did it incompetently. That would be the argument.
I think they're actually trying to save the infrastructure and stuff, so they don't have
They're
to bother
not,
with
though.
rebuilding
Oh,
after they take it.
They have
They're
bombed quite a
not.
lot of infrastructure.
They've
though.
been destroying infrastructure. Like people are dying because of the amount of infrastructure that's been fucking deleted.
I
bombing
gotta
civilians.
split. I gotta split hairs here, because here's what we've seen in Russian history versus what we've seen in this particular invasion. Usually, this invasion would be a lot quicker, and there would be a hell of a lot higher body count if the Russians were playing to their traditional doctrine. Because what they do is before they move into an area, they shell the living dog shit out of it with artillery.
Yes.
And we're not talking a little bit here and there. We're talking brigade level artillery units will flatten a fucking
days
Do you
long.
know what would happen? Do you know what would happen if Russia did that?
Nothing.
Tiberius, do
Nothing
you know
would
what happened
happen.
if Russia? No, there would be a huge pushback from the rest of the world. NATO would instantly be on Ukraine's side. I guarantee there'd be boots on ground.
NATO is on
There would be
Ukraine's
Russia.
side.
Russia
Shut up,
is just
Sparky.
trying to. Russia's just trying to evade the United States, Germany, British, NATO to go in and actually help Ukraine. They're probably happy now that we're not helping Ukraine. All we're doing is putting economic sanctions on them, but they're trying to evade us actually going in and helping Ukraine militarily.
So here's the real question, and I think this is actually the gambit that Putin was making, is that NATO was never going to show up to the party. I think that's really what the conclusion was, is that the Germans do not have a military that can fight. The French are not going to cross half of fucking Europe to defend the Ukrainians. And the Americans here are divided at home, and we don't agree on even what to do here at home, let alone somewhere else. So I think Putin calculated correctly that we weren't going to join the party, and we never are going to join the party. So what is the actual operation here? I think he's pushing in. He's going to see the sanctions, and we're in a race. Either our system breaks because we just had 5 million Ukrainian refugees flood into Europe, or their system breaks because people are waiting 4 hours for bread. That's literally where we are right now.
So if we're going, if the Americans were never going to join the party and are never going to join the party, like you said, then why do we have roughly 11,000 troops on Ukraine's border? So we have roughly 9,000 in Poland and roughly 2,000 in Romania. So why do we have roughly 11,000 troops
in Romania?
It's because literally the Poles were screaming bloody murder. It's like, get your ass over here right now. And so we sent 18th Airborne Corps over there. And of course, half of the our force isn't even there yet. But
that's the 82nd Airborne. But yeah,
82nd Airborne's already deployed. The 101st will be shipping out here in about a week and a half. And then you'll see, 4th Mountain Division and all the auxiliary units going with it over the next month. Like, yeah, the entire corps is going to get deployed into largely Poland and Romania and a little bit of the Baltic states.
But why send the 82nd Airborne if we're not going to end up in combat? The 82nd Airborne is a combat unit.
It's because the 82nd Airborne is the primary, like, fast action movie force of the United States military. We could send 3rd Corps over there in Fort Hood, but we can't because it takes 45 days just to get the Abrams over there because the fucker's 70 damn tons.
Yeah, it takes.
I don't disagree. Getting tanks over there would be a slow process.
Yeah. So, like, literally, the reason why that we sent 18th Airborne Corps, and particularly the 82nd Airborne Division, at first and foremost, is that it's our rapid action development forces. We can move that force, and that we're talking a division level force, in about 72 hours anywhere in the world, and be combat effective when they get off the plane. There's not a lot of other forces that we have that can do that outside of the 101st. Like, literally, that corps, the 18th Airborne Corps, is built to do that.
But that's the design of airborne battalions. That's what they're designed to do. When you're looking at armored corps divisions, they are not designed to get over there in a moment's notice. The 82nd Airborne is essentially the international 911 brigade you send out when something happens. That is their mission. That's what they train to do. That is what they do, and they do it well. That's why the 101st.
The question has still been skirted. If we're never going to join Ukraine,
I just want to interject here. I think it's like 2.5 million people, not 5 million.
No. It's 2.5, but the actual operational objective is to generate probably about 3 to 6 million refugees out of Ukraine over the course of the next month.
I mean, if we're just like guessing Putin's secret intentions, I don't like. Why are we doing that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been watching this. What I thought this invasion was going to happen 7 years ago. So like, this is not anything new for me at all.
Hey, and when you look at invading another sovereign country,
Wait, what
you
did you
have to
see?
have
So
more
what,
than a
what, I'm
reason
sorry.
than,
What did you see
oh,
7 years ago
my
that
land and
indicated that?
soil. Blood and soil, fuck.
There are
Yeah.
there are a total
Wait. I want to
of how many
wait.
Ukrainians live in Ukraine.
Wait, stop. So there's 44 million. But Loner asked Tiberius a question. I want to make sure Tiberius can respond to that. Loner, can
Yeah,
you repeat the question?
I wanted to know what you've been watching for the last 7 years that has given you this insight into Putin's like covert strategy. Or
Yeah, and so I get to talk with a lot of graybeards. Particularly, there's a user named Colonel Dan here on Twitch that you guys can talk to. He's a retired Air Force colonel, so I get to talk with people like this all the time. Anyway, long story short is that there was 2 things that we saw. Number one, Russia is in a box, primarily demography. Forget Europe or Western Europe and how they're running out of kids. The Russians had a birth collapse post-Soviet Union back in 1991 that literally limited the size of how big the Red Army could be by 60%. Is that literally that's how much their birth rate dropped off. Now it's recovering slowly after the Cold War, but they knew that the Red Army was going to go from about 2 million men down to about 1, and it was going to hit somewhere around 2017. Whenever we didn't see that, I thought the invasion was probably kind of done for, because that they kind of missed their window where they could use normal Russian doctrine of just flooding the area with armor and manpower and taking it over. So I thought we kind of averted that. But what I have seen out of the Russians for about the last 5 years is that the original sanctions back in 2014 have made it to where the Russians cannot re-equip themselves like they originally intended. The T-14 Armada, yeah, absolutely wonderful tank. They have 2 of them because they can't fund the weapons programs anymore to actually replace their former equipment that's aging. The T-90 is now a 30-year-old tank, and it's not operationally viable for what they want to do with the damn. So yeah, they're using old equipment, and they're basically, at least for me, showing that they think they're cornered. And if they don't do something now, Russia's over. The funny thing is that they may have preempted it to where Russia's over anyway. So I don't know. I'll put it this way. I think this is a little bit psychotic, but this is what you do when you are panicked, is that you make panicky moves and panicky decisions. And I think that's what the invasion of Ukraine was.
because okay, it's fine. It's okay.
Are you wanting to go Stardust? Because my question was still skirted.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead with you.
Okay, so you guys keep saying they're there simply to protect the Polish, but you wouldn't need 11,000 troops just to protect the Polish. You wouldn't need that. You wouldn't need that amount of troops just to protect the Polish. You see this in other countries where we have a much less troops, and people are literally scared to go there just simply because there's American troops there. Because if you hit an American troop, you've got the full force of the American military against you. So again, my question stands. Why do we have 11,000 troops surrounding the Ukrainian border if we are certainly never going to join Ukraine's side against Russia? Obviously not nuclear, because nuclear war is mutually assured destruction, but we're talking about non-nuclear war.
I mean, again, it's a lot of guesswork, and I'm not sure why this conversation is so fucking far off topic. So I'm just chilling because I'm listening to a whole bunch of people that pretend to know what's going on, and I think maybe Lonerbox and Dylan might be the only ones that actually understand what's going on. But that being said, sometimes shows of force can be symbolic in nature, man. Right? Like, so it doesn't have to be like that they're actually doing anything.
No, but what I'm saying is,
wait, we'll let him finish.
I'm just saying it just as easily could be the same thing as, Belarus wanting nukes back, right? Just as like a hey, just so you know, we're scary, right? America could be doing the same shit, moving troops in and saying like, hey, we're just here to help evacuees and stuff, but also putting a large enough force there that like, lets other people know like, hey, don't forget, we could fuck you up if we really wanted to, right? Like, we don't know. Like, so to guess everybody's intentions to guess Putin's intentions and to guess like what do the people in Russia think? Well, who fucking knows? Because if you get in a protest group larger than 2, like you end up in a fucking gulag sometimes. Like, what do the Ukrainian people think? Well, who fucking knows? Because it's a fog of war. Like, I think there's a lot of moving pieces here that are really, really difficult for us to understand, and we won't really understand until later when the history books are written about it. And so, I mean, I don't know. Like, it just seems like a moot
Well,
point.
here's what I'm Here's what I'm
listen,
pushing back against.
Sprout,
I'm
do you mind if
pushing
I go really
back
quickly?
against- Yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say it before it escapes me. If we can all agree then that if birth rates are like part of the reason, then you guys should probably start manning up Pearl Harbor again, because Japan has definitely got a problem there. Okay, sorry.
So what I was pushing back against was Tiberius and aircraft that are absolutely positive that the United States is never going to join Ukraine in their fight. They're absolutely sure of it, that it's never going to happen. And I'm confused as to what makes them absolutely sure of it. I mean, have they been in the Russian meetings with Putin where Putin says, I'm definitely not going to do, they're definitely not going to do this? Have they been to have they been to US meetings where Biden says we're definitely not going to do this in top secret meetings? I'm just curious on where they're getting this information, because I haven't seen that information to where the US is definitely not going to help Ukraine defend its own country.
It makes no strategic sense to engage with Russia over Ukraine. I understand that that's maybe a little bit too out of your scope of vision, but the reason why there's people in Poland is because they're a NATO ally, and the same reason why we sent Vice President knee pads down there is to make the Poles feel better.
So all of NATO put economic sanctions on Russia.
I mean,
yes,
so
but all of NATO and
real
their
quick.
forces, if you understand, 70% of NATO's strength is the United States military. Germany won't even be combat effective for another fucking decade. NATO is toothless without America, and if America doesn't show that they are there to support their NATO allies, NATO is dead anyway.
Okay, real quick. I'm Sprouticus. I'm 100% with you. I think the fog of war is in a situation where we don't fucking know, and guesswork is kind of silly. But if you wanted some evidence of their position, I don't know. The president of
Public statements?
president of America tweeted out today, I want to be clear, we will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full might of a united and galvanized NATO, but we will not fight a war against Russia in Ukraine. A direct confrontation between NATO and Russia is World War III and something we must strive to prevent.
Okay,
I'm with you. Who fucking knows? But I mean, the president literally said that he would not.
I don't necessarily trust presidential statements. When it comes
Neither do I.
So
I was just saying. Sounds like here's some evidence.
When it comes to this time period, I don't necessarily trust presidential statements, because they can say something and be planning something exactly the opposite in the back room, because they don't want Russia to know that we could join Ukraine, and that's entirely possible. But at this point in time, I don't really trust presidential statements, because we're in a weird point in time where Ukraine's fighting a battle, and are we going to join? Aren't we going to join? Becomes a real question.
Yeah, I'm with you. You just said like, what's the evidence? And I'm like, the president of the United States himself today.
I want to answer Sprout's question from my end. The reason why an entire airborne division is over in Europe is because we just saw the Russians move 12 divisions in Ukraine, and the Poles are scared shitless. Not only the Poles, but we also have the Romanians and the Estonians, the Latvians, the Baltic states. Yeah, one division doesn't stop 12. There's a reason they're literally gearing up to send the entire corps to Europe. Is that in the event that Russia is actually that crazy and they would actually attack a NATO country, you're not going to need just 18th Airborne Corps. You're going to need 3rd and 5th Corps to deploy to Europe as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree. We're going to need 10th Mountain over there. But what I am stating is that it wouldn't be hard for 82nd Airborne to defend their own while 10th Mountain gets their ass over there. We've done this before. Air Force can move almost instantaneously. So it's not like things like this have not been done before.
Well,
you could pull 10th Mountain out of Korea pretty quickly too.
10th Mountain's in Georgia. Anyway,
wait. What about 12th Unicorn?
Well, they're in
10th Mountain's in Drum,
and as well as
7th Guerrilla.
Yeah.
Are they
anyway,
also in Fort Polk?
The long and the short
Tortoise.
here. Oh my! Shut up, Dylan.
Are they not in Fort Polk anymore?
Anyway,
I'm looking it up right now. 10th Mountain. I guess 10th Mountain still has some soldiers in Korea, but Army Times says they have 300 soldiers in Korea, but
I thought they had
Yeah,
more than that. All right.
It's mostly
fair enough.
Second ID that mans Korea.
All right. Well, it's been a few years for me. Sorry.
Anyway, like long story short here is that yeah, we can move forces pretty quickly, but the problem is even with all the C-17s and C-5s that we have is that you're talking about a brigade pretty much a day that we can deploy anywhere in the world. That's still, we're talking when this all adds up is that it takes, a month to move a full corps because of how big this shit is. And it's heavy. And these are the light forces. Forget flying Abrams tanks across the ocean. That takes forever.
Can we just say, like, the topic is sanctions, and now we're talking
Yeah.
about the 57th Lizard, okay? I don't care. So we got to bring it back to sanctions, okay? And we've got like a few more minutes left on sanctions. So does anybody have anything left to say on sanctions?
Yes, I'm really curious how this thing has not been about sanctions at all. Thank you, Dylan. I'm very curious. What does the panel think? Broadly speaking, how do these sanctions help? First of all, I'm curious what you guys think that the Russia should do in the other than not invading Ukraine. It seems to be we've been encapsulating them to do something, but it seems like we have a schizoid policy. I'm not sure what everybody wants Russia to do other than pull out of Ukraine. It seems like
they should probably give Crimea back and to stop arbitrarily recognizing separatist regions that don't have popular support in eastern Ukraine.
You think they're going to give Crimea back?
Probably not. Yeah, but I'd like to. But that's like again, the sanctions that were placed on them since the invasion aren't about that. But
there have been sanctions in place since 2014. So should the sanctions stay in place forever if they refuse to give Crimea back?
The way that the sanctions work are specifically about the ones that we're talking about, or the ones are specifically about Ukraine. As soon as they withdraw from Ukraine, the sanctions go away.
Yeah, and I think again, historically, okay, you can look at sanctions since early 20th century. They tend to not work. They tend to not influence behavior. Generally, it's either on very small countries, like Russia uses the threat of sanctions to pull Eastern European countries into their trade deals, or with military strength, you can achieve things alongside sanctions. But I think when it comes to Crimea, obviously people don't want to escalate into a full-on war over Crimea, but it's I think if you're going to annex a territory arbitrarily, then I think the world should make it difficult for you somehow, right?
Well, they should make it difficult to a point, and I can agree with that. The problem is when you go too broad, you go too heavy, you're not actually hurting the Russian government. You are hurting the Russian people, and you're not going to change anything in this. When Russia decided they were going to invade Ukraine, I assure you, they said they were going to take the Donetsk and Donbass regions. They're going to take it all the way over to the river, at least, at very minimum, because they've got to get something out of it. If they're going to engage, put their equipment and their people into combat, put them in harm's way, Russia has to get something out of it. It is about the minerals. It makes more sense. It is about Russia controlling the world market with things like titanium and things like that, because we have isolated Russia economically. And one of the ways for them to get back into the world economic stage is to have almost complete control over specific minerals. So Russia has a good bit of the world's titanium. Ukraine has a pretty large amount themselves. And with Ukraine cozying up to the West, well, that really starts to infringe on Russia's market, and that's hurting them economically in the long run. This is something that I think that they are doing to save their economic lives.
Yeah, and the gas and oil reserves in eastern Ukraine, they're trying to seize those up so they can't be leveraged against the existing Russian market for oil and gas. There's that, but they definitely did the calculus before they went in. They 100% knew there was going to be severe economic sanctions for doing this. But the problem is they've been sanctioned so long, they've been seeking other ways around them with other countries, trade partners like China. They've been doing this for a while. They know what the outcome is going to be. And I think we need to do the calculus ourselves of if these people continue to be more and more self-determined and encapsulated, we need to figure out what we're going to do for the long-term plans to bring them back in, because increasing sanctions isn't going to do it. It's just going to exacerbate the divide even more. So I think we need to pick a different tack.
It's just that you're trying
to... Wait. Okay, everybody shut up. Everybody, so that immediately went off the world. Okay, who wants to respond to that? Okay.
Can I just ask Lonerbox a quick question?
Okay,
for
so I'll
something you
write
said?
everybody. Okay, wait. Actually, I'm gonna throw it to Parker because Parker hasn't said anything in forever, and they raised their
Yes,
hands.
thank you.
Everybody else who wanted to speak, raise your hand quick. I'll write your name down, and I'll tell you when to put your hands down. Okay. Continue, Parker.
So I just want to ask the question: if we're not doing sanctions, what are we doing? Because I know you said diplomacy earlier, but that was kind of like a really broad statement.
Oh, are you talking to me? Yeah,
Yeah.
Trade compacts,
hand
trade deals, exactly the type of thing that Russia went when he sat before NATO and condemned them for. Look, we're funding you guys are doing all the things, we're paying for these things, and what do? You go make a pipeline with Germany. We need more pipelines with Germany. We need more interdeveloped economies with the rest of the Europe between Russia. We need economic if neoliberalism is the lay of the land, if global capital is the lay of the land, if we're done with national protectionist policies, we need to integrate the economies. Pipelines are a literal line in between, so we need to connect those economies up, or else these exacerbate. They're going to continue to happen.
So if the Ukrainians decide that since the early 90s that a compromised trade deal between Russia and Europe isn't working for them, and they show a very clear democratic will, a popular will to go with the EU more, I don't know, it sounds like you're taking an imperialist perspective here by saying that the two superpowers should compromise, even though that's not what the people of Ukraine wanted.
Yeah, there is an element, and there is an unfortunate. I do feel like a little bit of to stave off a World War III type conflict, and to in the light of the past, since 1946 history of the liberalization and EU is a European unionization of the economies there. That those states in the Eastern Bloc have sort of been already marginalized, and there is an element of sort of feeding Ukraine into the meat grinder so as to stave off a larger economic and military conflict. And I do appreciate that, and it is unfortunate. I don't have a fast answer of what to do about that, other than broadly try to integrate them in other trade policies that aren't so vehemently reflexively anti-Russia, and that don't exacerbate red lines that have been previously stated by Russia and understood through diplomatic cables. We've understood that Ukraine, NATO, EU, that has been a red line we've known for a long time. So we keep on playing fast and loose with that, and then doing surprise Pikachu face when Russia does shit like this.
Okay, so my second point is then you would need to demonstrate that any kind of diplomacy or compromise is actually going to guarantee Ukraine's safety from Russia, because it's not as if Russia's encroachment on Ukraine was a response to sanctions. I'm sorry, whether it was it's been conventional wisdom since at least 2010 that Russia wanted to annex Crimea, or even in 2003 when Russia tried to encroach on the Tuzla Island that's off Crimea as well. This goes way further back, and it's not as if sanctions caused Russia to use the Sevastopol port to launch attacks on Georgia, knowing full well that retaliation from Georgia would have hit Ukraine, even though they weren't at war with Georgia. So that's the bit I'm missing. I'm missing where you think this kind of I'm going to call it appeasement guarantees the safety of places like Ukraine.
It doesn't guarantee the safety of Ukraine. You're correct. I don't have a fast answer for that. But also, it's not explicit because of sanctions that the isolation occurred. The isolation occurred just because we've done everything we can. There seems to be native, when you go back and just broadly, I only know the bullet points on this thing. From in my head, NATO is specifically to keep Russia out, keep Germany down, and keep America in Europe. And under that very basic rubric, it seems like literally keeping Russia out has been the modality. So maybe reevaluating that underlying thing might broadly ameliorate this versus worried about smaller trade compacts or sanctions.
Do you think there could have been more of a guarantee for Ukraine if there was some kind of I don't know, defense agreement relating to nuclear weapons and other nuclear countries?
I don't think they should have given up their nukes.
Well, can I ask the question?
Whoa. Yep. So we're gonna go Fabian, Sprout, and then Stardust in that order.
Loner,
yeah,
I'm just a little confused, right? And like I said, I'm no fucking expert on this. Maybe you have information that I don't have, but as far as you keep saying over and over and over again that the Donbass region, they don't want to be free or independent in any way. The problem that I have with that, and maybe you're aware of some information that I'm not, is that we have evidence of failed referendum, right? We have evidence of like kind of mock, votes for independence that even Russia didn't recognize. And then we have some polling data from Ukrainian controlled areas. And then we also have polling data from like the DNR and LNR and like, independence or rebel groups or however you want to label it areas. I'm trying to understand, how are you so confident in the region that has multiple powers at play, where it's very difficult to get information, that you're just very, very quickly and kind of just saying, no, these people don't want independence. Like, I just know that. Like, what
Okay.
do you have some evidence I'm missing or something?
You're right. So I'm going mostly just by like, I don't know, polling data from Pew, etc. You can say there's a skew. I'm sure
Yeah, it's
Russia
because
has a very different
Ukrainian.
opinion.
Yeah, they're getting
It's just
Ukrainian controlled area polling data.
so one of
When
my
there's other
so
power plays here. I just
yes,
want
one
to
of my problems
caution it
is
being so
okay.
certain about something that I don't think we can be certain about.
Okay, so I had this discussion with someone yesterday, and I actually wasn't that confident about the polling until today. So, but I just assumed like, okay, so we've got a similar situation in Scotland. There's lots of polling suggesting, not similar. There's a lot of polling suggesting that independence is now like basically above 50% or hovers around that. But we're not being allowed a referendum by the United Kingdom government. And one of the points of Scottish independence is we'd like to be like a bit more like economically Nordic, and I still wouldn't think that would justify anything like Norway supporting secessionist groups in Scotland for Scottish independence, even though we're not being granted a referendum. I don't think, even if you could say there was 60, 70% secession favorability, then I don't think that justifies what Russia's doing. That's one. Two, I'm
Well, we're
also
not talking about-
suspicious of the Russian side of the data because the pro-Russia side doesn't even mention polling as far as I know. They just say Russian-speaking population or ethnic Russians, which to me suggests they're trying to use ethnic Russians as their way to imply that it's got popular support when it doesn't.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I don't know why we're talking about Scotland when we're talking about Ukraine. I mean, maybe it's a fair analogy. I don't know that it is, especially when we look at the political differences and like, some of the things that might be happening, like if you have I don't think England's dropping any bombs in Scotland either, right? Like there's a little bit more nuance to that. But yeah, no, I was just curious if you had like really strong evidence for that, or if you were just like kind of like going with a best guess, and it sounds like it's a best guess. And I just wanted to point out maybe we should be careful about that.
I don't know if like Pew Research is going to be a best guess. It's like, okay, you could say it is the best guess. I definitely prefer it to like, as far as propaganda goes, right? I think Russia's probably like the worst offender here, right?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think Ukrainian pro-Ukrainian propaganda is pretty strong as well. But yeah, no. So we're not really sure whether or not a majority of people want their independence there. But
well, these polls aren't coming from
independence in general.
Yeah, I mean, like these polls aren't coming from Ukrainian state media. They're coming from around the world. Whereas Russia is like, okay, so far, okay, I'm just going to use this example. I know it's cheap, but Russian state media is the only side of the media that has been using video game footage in their reporting. Okay.
To be fair, I mean, a lot of the Ukrainian stuff comes straight out of Arma 3. Hassan was even duped by it, which I thought was hilarious.
But that's Twitter, okay? That's not Ukrainian state media, okay? Twitter is not the other side's equivalent to Russian state media, okay? You'd have to show the New York Times doing something like that, or like the BBC, which we don't have, okay?
So, to this point,
Dylan, are you Dylan Dawson right now?
What was that?
Are you Dylan Dawson me right now?
Dylan Dawson. Hey, look, I'm always moving and shaking as long as.
Right,
but maybe if you get a little bit more pro-Ukraine, your internet starts.
I see how it is. The ghost of Kiev strikes again.
The shill of Kiev. The shill of
Kiev.
Thank you. Sprout, Stardust, and Tiberius in that order. So Sprout.
So Mythic, you are against the sanctions because you think that the sanctions are going to bring Russia closer to China, correct?
I think that might be a unintended consequence of it.
Okay, so I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but Russia's already declined. I mean, China's already declined Russia on war efforts. The only thing that I'm tracking, unless you have more information than I do, is that China has accepted Russia into SIPs. Now, if you look at SIPs has 76 direct partners. 75 of those direct partners are in mainland China. One of those direct partners is in Hong Kong. They have 1,100 and some odd indirect partners, which means they're not forced to participate in SIPs. So the countries that have applied sanctions on SWIFT probably aren't going to accept SIPs from Russia. So we have basically securely locked Russia in financially to just Russia, China, and Hong Kong because they cannot go through SWIFT. That's a
Okay.
pretty harsh economic sanction that is going to deter war efforts because war is already expensive, and now they can't trade, they can't pay back debt because they can't use SWIFT. It's going to be, or at least it's going to be more expensive to pay back debt.
So you're
Now
saying that
they're
you're
put in
saying
a
that
very rough position financially, to where it's going to make it very financially difficult to go into a war.
Yeah, I think that they anticipated this. I think they're going to fight with the equipment that they have. I don't think that they necessarily need explicit financing, especially when they already have the modalities to just conscript the fighters that they need, who they're severely underpaid already. They already have all their shitty artillery and munitions. They already have all that stuff. And it seems like they're ready to do a long, protracted thing in Ukraine. But I'm curious what you're saying there, because you said that, if I'm hearing you correctly, that you say that China initially declined to give them armaments or something. I forget. And honestly, I've not kept abreast of this very much. So please forgive me my very shallow understanding of this. But basically that China declined to give them aid, and yet you say that they have a payment modality that locks them into China. I think that wouldn't that precipitate more it wouldn't ameliorate them doing more business with China if China and Hong Kong and that area of the world is the only place they can take payments from?
China declined Russia in war efforts. They right now it's obvious, or at least from the moves they're making, that China does not want to get into a war. So they declined Russia war efforts. What they have accepted Russia in is SIPs, and that's the only thing that, as far as I'm tracking, that China has accepted Russia in is SIPs, because Russia got kicked out of SWIFT.
Right.
It's also not to mention that, like you say, they have their munitions and they have their equipment and all that. What they probably might not have is the economic capability to mobilize all of that. And that's like that's kind of where the sanctions are coming in, I think, especially since one of the expected outcomes at this point could be that they end up with a very Afghanistan style long haul where they're just in there, but the Ukrainians are constantly getting armed and supported by the rest of the world. So I wouldn't say that them having loads of tanks just sitting there is necessarily prep,
Real
Okay.
quick, Loner Box, are you using information from the 2015 Pew research?
Let me see.
Because the one
this
that
is
I
from
have,
2014.
okay,
No,
so
not Pew. Wait, hang on. Pew
you
was
said Pew,
25th
right? Was
to
the date?
23rd of April. Where was that? Let's see.
Okay, because the 2015 data is a little bit of an issue because they asked all Ukrainians, and because of conflict, they didn't ask anybody in the Luhansk, Donetsk, or Crimea regions. So they specifically asked people whether or not Ukraine and the Donbass region should be separate, whether or not they should remain part of Ukraine but have greater autonomy, et cetera, et cetera. But they didn't ask any of the areas that were the people that actually may or may not want to leave.
Wait, the one that said they asked Eastern Ukrainians. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Who the fuck did that?
How
Who did-
is that? Is that
Sparky.
CTV about to
Sparky.
cover?
That was Sparky.
Oh, God.
I saw Sparky.
No, I'm just curious, like if you had a different data set.
Oh yeah, the other one is from the Kiev International Institute of Sociology. I can link you that one if you want as well. I thought
Yeah,
the
I'll
Pew
check it
one
out
was just
after.
Eastern Ukraine, which is that's where the ethnic Russians are, right? Hang on, I'll
Yeah,
drop
the
it in the thing.
Okay.
Donetsk and Luhansk
Donetsk.
are part of Eastern Ukraine.
Okay, so we are actually going over the amount of time we have allotted for this topic, and there's still two people that need to talk, and that's Tiberius and Stardust. So I'm going to throw it to them back first to Stardust and then Tiberius, and then we're going to just wrap up because we need to move on to the other topics. Stardust?
Yeah. So earlier, what was mentioned is that Ukraine has a whole bunch of graphite, apparently. Well, China has like 80% of the world's graphite. And then Brazil and Germany are trailing right behind. Another thing that was brought up was Russia being an exporter of titanium and being threatened by Ukraine's supplies of titanium, even if Russia is a big exporter of titanium, there's still a small percentage of the global supply. Even if Russia is threatened by Ukraine, um, them contributing to that market is not a justification for Russia to be invading a sovereign country, basically. And then I would say economic sanctions are the closest thing that we have to diplomacy in this situation. It's basically the last thing that they can do, stopping short of actually putting troops in the area. And I just don't understand where this justification is coming from that, oh, Ukraine is an economic threat to Russia, so that's why they're invading, and that's totally okay.
No one said it was okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know what your point was then.
It's just a viable reason to actually risk people and equipment.
It's not.
Just because
no,
you
it's
don't
not.
accept it, because you just go back to talking about your father's junk.
Okay, all right, mashed potato brain, mashed potato person, okay?
I'm gonna throw it over to Tiberius.
To hit what Mythic was kind of hitting on. So did the Russians plan for this? There's no way in hell they didn't. The question is it going to go to the Russian plan? From everything that we're seeing so far, it looks like they miscalculated. Not only in their military efforts just to enter the country, but also in the economic blowback that was going to come after them. Why that is, that's up in the air. I don't really want to go to there, but I think there's only really three options here. Either one, we're in a new Cold War where both sides kind of stabilize down and we lock down, and we're going to watch the Russians slowly take over Ukraine over the next 3 months. If it is not that, then you're probably seeing one side basically have to capitulate here. Either the Russian economy grinds to a standstill to the point where it's 1991 over again, or NATO becomes politically unstable because they have to deal with a migrant train that just rolled into the country or through major European countries. 5 million refugees, which is possible. We're not there yet, Star, but we definitely is possible. That's a lot of people that you have to house, clothe, and feed who are not generating economic activity. That is a massive burden for all of the Eurozone to deal with, not only just Poland or Germany or wherever the hell they go. I'll end with that.
Okay, so we're gonna do ending statements. Everybody's gonna get 30 seconds. Try to keep it very brief. This topic was very long. We're gonna start with Sparky.
Sanctions to a point are fine and good when you're trying to oppose a bad actor in the international community. The problem is when you go too far, it becomes more of an economic warfare thing. It can be justification for war. If you back a country into a corner, you're going to see history repeat itself. History doesn't happen the exact same way, but it always frickin' rhymes. And so look at 1939 Germany, look at 1940s frickin' Japan, see what happened there, come to your own conclusions.
Fabian.
Yeah, so I really fucking hate this topic. And the reason I hate this topic is because every time something about Ukraine shows up, everyone automatically becomes a fucking foreign policy analyst magically. And it just is what it is. Like myself, even in this debate topic, I said some dumb shit about voting for water when it was, and then like had to do reading during the middle and be like, oh shit, okay, there's a lot of issues around the water and stuff. And I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. What I hate is when people talk about this shit and they act like they know what they're talking about. And then you ask a couple simple questions and then all of a sudden you realize that they don't know what they're talking about, because none of us do, because it's a fog of war. You should think about this morally, and you should think about this in terms of goals. Sanctions work if they're targeted. But what I see is a lot of backpedaling and a lot of economic excuses from these sanctions. So that's my point.
Sprout.
Yeah, so I don't have a problem with these sanctions. I think that they should have been enacted sooner. I think this is deterring Russia from going further. Obviously, with them not being able to use SWIFT and only being able to use SIPs, it severely deters them. It's a lot more expensive for them to do anything really. So I think that these sanctions should have been enacted sooner. But I'm glad they're enacted now, and I think that they're a good thing deterring Russia from moving further into Ukraine.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to Lonerbox.
Just regarding the polls, I'm pretty sure the one from the Kyiv Institute of Sociology also did show that like a majority of people in Crimea did favor like secession. This was like before the thing happened, I think. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll just make it simple and say that my point doesn't really hinge upon popularity in the Donbass region, because even if it was above 60% favor of secession, then it doesn't justify what Russia did. Yeah, sanctions. I don't like the. I think people do have a grim attitude to it sometimes. I think kind of like chortling at ordinary Russian people, many of whom probably oppose Putin, suffering for a war that they didn't take part in, is kind of cringe. But yeah, I think it's the best we've got.
I'm gonna throw it over to Mythic.
I'm not against the idea of sanctions. I think that in a situation like this, they tend to only, from what I parsed over, it looks like about 20% of the time they're effective in stopping an active military action. They seem to radicalize the populace more than they do anything else. And seeing as how they seem to precipitate some troops, it appears that this is sort of like a preemptive thing to foment regime change in the West towards the Balkanization of Russia broadly, which I think is the actual intended consequence of this.
I'm gonna throw it over to Parker.
I think that a lot of the times people try to make broad, concise claims about intentions that people have, like about these like wars and whatnot, and try to relate them back to like past historic events. But I think that we just need to be a little more acknowledgeable of the fact that we don't know that anything is going to specifically happen in a specific way. You can't make a claim based upon something like that that's going to happen. And I feel like a lot of these conversations we have about like foreign policy and whatnot about this specific topic can be very, very misleading in that way.
Okay, could throw it over to Stardust.
Yep. Again, I support the sanctions. The sanctions have been some of the most far-reaching, effective sanctions I've ever seen, and that a lot of people have ever seen. A lot of experts have weighed in that maybe there's a little bit more that we can do, but as far as the sanctions have gone so far, they've gone so much farther than we've ever seen before. The ruble has tanked. China initially was kind of turning the other way as Russia did what they wanted, but even now Russia has reached out to China for help in I believe it was they needed airplane parts, and China turned them down. China has even kind of taken like a both sides stance on this. So and then I guess the last thing I would say is that if you're so concerned about the Russian people, which very fair thing to be concerned about, I'm concerned about them too. As soon as they withdraw from Ukraine, and it is built into the sanctions, as soon as they withdraw, the sanctions are lifted. So that's all they need to do. I don't want to hear about all this bullshit about titanium, graphite, whatever the fuck, my dad's dick. Okay, I don't need to hear about it. We're talking about the sanctions. We're talking about Ukraine, and there's no reason for Russia to be invading a sovereign country.
Throwing it over to Tiberius.
All right, to wrap this up, I'll just survey this. Number one, I'm not going to talk about justifications because when it comes to geopolitics, pretty much morality takes a massive shit. So I find that to be a bit of a joke in its own right. So what I'll talk about here is that, do I support the sanctions? Number one, yes. Do I think that they're going to be effective? That's going to be relative. I don't think it's going to make the Russian army just pull tail and go out of Ukraine. I don't expect that at all. But I do expect it to grind the Russian economy to not necessarily a standstill, but to a point where it really hurts, to where you're risking civilizational collapse like what we saw now. If you're not willing to do that, if you think sanctions are not in favor to have a free and independent Ukraine, or to accept that there's just a second Cold War now, you've got to move an entire U.S. army or division into Ukraine, and you have to say, Russia, fight me. I'm not really wanting to jump two nuclear powers into each other's face in an armed shooting conflict. So I'll take the sanctions. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna do something I don't usually do. I'm gonna give my opinion. I care too much about this one, and I'm the host, so I can do that if I want to, even though I try not to do it. I don't care. Okay, so the first thing I want to say, okay, is that I think when it comes to Russia's failures on the field, a lot of people say, well, Grozny, why don't we see Grozny 2.0 then? Because Grozny, a lot of people don't know, was a last resort for the Russians when they flattened Grozny. They tried to take Grozny, and the Chechens kicked their fucking ass. They got beaten back multiple times. And so I don't think the fact that they haven't flattened Kiev or Kharkiv or Sumy or Mariupol or any of these other locations isn't evidence that the Russian military didn't actually try to take these locations. They obviously have, or we wouldn't see the massive equipment losses, or we wouldn't see the column try to advance into the city. It happened multiple times. We saw the VDV landings. I think what it shows is that they failed in that. They thought the Ukrainian military was going to be a pushover, and now we're seeing in Mariupol, they're falling back on those tactics of Grozny. We're seeing them bomb maternity hospitals. We're seeing them turn to those old tactics. Not only that, but now we're seeing the Russians doing false flags to get Belarus involved and talking about bringing in 16,000 Syrian mercenaries. Why would the Russians be all of a sudden bringing in 16,000 Syrian mercenaries unless they were having extremely large casualties numbers and they knew that urban warfare with the Ukrainians is going to be a disaster for them? I think that shows that they still have the upper hand militarily, but they underpredicted what the Ukrainians were going to do. That's the first thing. Second thing, when it comes to resources, every single war, once it starts, everyone wants to make it about resources. Everybody thinks that every global conflict can be explained by saying, well, there's a lot of iron there, or there's a lot of oil there, or there's a lot of cobalt there. Resources and economics, of course, comes into play, but a lot of people try to hyper focus on it because of the Middle East. The Middle East has completely, and foreign policy discussion on the Middle East has ruined people's brains when it comes to geopolitics. They think every conflict is about resources. That's bullshit. A lot of it is about geopolitical positioning, power balances, alliances, and economics outside of resources when it comes to consumer economies, right? And so I think that resources probably played a role, but I honestly think it was minimal. To be completely honest, I will say also, if they do end up flattening these cities, we're not going to move into Ukraine. We're not going to move into Ukraine. We're not going to move into Ukraine. Unless some crazy shit happens, like they drop a nuke or something, like we're not going to jump into Ukraine. Other than that, I support sanctions, not as a way to punish the Russian people, but I want to make it difficult for the Russians to finance the war, and I like to seize oligarchs' yachts. Okay, that's my position. I won't do that for any other topic. I don't do this often, but I care a lot about foreign policy, so I wanted to give my position. Okay, let's now go on to the, people can call me biased. Yes, I am. We're going to go very biased. I'm the shill of Kiev. We're going to go into the next topic, and the next topic is Twitch misinformation bans. Over 100 streamers, 100, a lot more than anybody thought, has been banned off of Twitch for spreading misinformation. A lot of these accounts included QAnon accounts, other things like that. And so my question to the room is, should Twitch be doing these misinformation bans? Do you support the new Twitch's new misinformation policy that targets accounts that spread misinformation, harmful misinformation, etc.? I'm going to start with Aircraft Sparky in the top left-hand corner.
No, I do not support it because no political channel would ever exist on Twitch. Everyone distributes misinformation. Look, when it comes down to it, remember when lab leak theory was, some type of weird conspiracy? Now it's pretty much the accepted truth of what happened. What is considered misinformation today is not going to be misinformation a month, 2 months, 3 months from now. Things change as more evidence and everything else comes out. So look, yeah, there are some conspiracy theories. You should actually be smart enough, intelligent enough to hear what people are saying, try to put two and two together, see if it actually equals to something that you can agree with, and go that route. If you take all your ideas from a streamer, you're dumb.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to Fabian.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Aircraft Sparky said, but I want to go a little deeper into this because what I've seen appears to be another example of individuals under large corporations getting themselves invested in trusted news initiative and state control power and takeover of social media as a means of censorship of the ideas and narrative of the American public at large. I have a lot of information because I looked into the financials of Global Disinformation Index and where their money comes from. And, it's very obvious that they're extremely left-wing biased. are the sources that they're using as a means of combating harmful disinformation. And I also think it's very interesting what we're choosing to focus on. You know, the last section about like going after, you know, forest fires and natural disasters and information about like the wrong areas and stuff like that, it's perfectly fine for temporary bans, right? Because you could actually lead to people dying. But when your policy is crafted around, quote, civic misinformation, undermining of political process, and COVID-19, it's very obvious that this is a political move to try and keep certain opinions, certain ideas that are anti-state and against the narrative that these large corporations in the state want. And then they're bringing in partners pretending to be non-biased when what they're really doing is, you know, what any company would do if it got $600 million from the CIA for your personal information.
Okay, I'm now going to throw it over to Sprouticus.
All right, so my position is going to maintain the same. My position has always been is that I think everyone should have a voice. I think that truth is going to talk the loudest. I think that you're not being forced to listen to certain people. Twitch is not mandating you to listen to certain people. I think everyone should be able to have a voice, and I think that any conspiracy theories that can be easily disproved with truth, and you should fight it head on instead of telling them they don't have a voice and kicking them off the platform, because if you fight it head on, you have a much higher rate of actually convincing people that that's not true, rather than kicking them off the platform, because then it makes the conspiracy theory all the better, right? Twitch doesn't want me to hear about it, it must be true. The government doesn't want me to hear about it, it must be true. The best way to fight this is actually to fight it head on and to fight it with truth rather than kick them off a platform.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Loner.
Generally against pretty much any kind of deplatforming. I think there have always been like historical exceptions. I think it was probably right during like the Second World War to ban Nazi propaganda in countries that were fighting the Nazis. I think when it comes to Twitch, I mean, you know, people have the right to a voice. Doesn't mean they have the right to a megaphone. If you're going to put like porn and like violence threats and all that on Twitch, then yeah, they should ban you. When it comes to disinformation, on the other hand, I don't know, because yeah, everyone's doing it. I think maybe I don't know exactly where I stand on the fact that people are putting out like very deliberate and very like propagandistic disinformation over a war. I don't know how like if some, like the harm of that could be demonstrated, and especially like the behavior of people like Infrared and like Jackson Hinkle at the moment talking about Russian sensing DNA bioweapons. Maybe I could be pushed on that, but at the moment I'm pretty anti-deplatforming. So
Mythic?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that broadly, I think these things have a lot of utility, especially on Twitch. You could argue that the information that is applied underneath Facebook posts or on Twitter, the little citation at the bottom saying like, for more information, click this link or whatever, that they also did on YouTube, that had some limited utility. But the people who are amenable, the people who are receptive to the type of conspiracies are generally low information people who aren't, number one, don't have the context for these things, or aren't able to parse academic responses. So they are very unusually influenced by people and will often parrot the talking points. In that sense, if you're interested in actually curbing harmful theories about vaccine denialism, electoral fraud that sort of precipitated the January 6th riots or whatever, the insurrection, those things can generally, you can put a big damper on them by removing content like this from Twitch, if that is your goal.
Okay, I'm going to throw it to Parker.
I think they should obviously get rid of like any violent type of content, but specifically I would be against misinformation bans for like the vaccine and other things like that. I think the best way to dismantle those types of ideas and those types of conspiracy theories is to give the counter arguments and give the logic based arguments, and I think people will parse out based upon that. Because I do think that if we just ban it and those people are still going to, get those arguments, and that kind of emboldens those arguments and those conspiracy theories, kind of like how Sprout said. So I definitely would be against the deplatforming. It's also like a very broad definition of misinformation, and it's really just up to the interpretation of Twitch or any of these social media platforms to determine what they think is misinformation.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Stardust.
So I think that as far as misinformation goes, I guess I'm still kind of trying to understand where the line is. I do think that if it is speech that can be tied to like an impact, like like a call for violence, something like that, definitely deplatforming is valid. I think that anything calling for violence, anything encouraging violence towards a group of people or towards an individual, definitely deplatform. As far as like conspiracy theories and the like, I'm not quite sure what the best way to combat that is yet. But if it's a conspiracy theory that, again, is encouraging harm, then I don't see anything wrong with taking that off the platform, especially if that's not reflecting your brand. But I do think that there is some value in addressing certain conspiracy theories head on and debunking them early before they spin out of control. So.
Got it. Also, people are asking about the policy specifically, so I'll just clarify it for everybody. Last week, Twitch rolled out a new misinformation policy that prohibits individuals or propaganda entities whose online presence is dedicated to disseminating misinformation with clear risks of real-world harm, but which leaves room for one-off statements containing misinformation. That's the general idea of it. Okay, just to give everybody an idea. I'm going to throw it over to Tiberius for the last intro.
I gotta thank you for this topic because it lets me fight with Scott, and every time that I actually get to fight with Scott, it's fun. I'm a little lukewarm on this particular topic, because in the last particular 10 to 15 years is that I have seen the amount of scientific and just media illiteracy that is out there, and to a level I don't really trust the common person to really sift through a lot of this information. So on one side, I respect the initiative that Twitch is trying to put out there, where it's like, hey, look, we are platform. We have some responsibility in the information that is sent out on our platform. I do respect that. However, on the other side of that, where the other mind kind of comes in, is that how adept or good is Twitch actually as an institution How adept is Twitch at actually sifting through information and what is correct and what is not, and where they can just be like, all right, you know what you're talking about, you don't know what you're talking about. I think that's a very relevant question. So I'm very lukewarm overall on this one. I like the initiative, but Twitch, are you up to the task on this one? I'll end with that.
Okay, I also want to say for everybody at home, let's say you want to access some of that restricted banned content, right? Let's say that you're in a country that's having all these news agencies banned due to rising tensions. Well, if you use Surfshark VPN with codes DBTV, then you get 3 months off free, and on top of that, you get 83% off 3 months past. I mean, that's beautiful. Isn't that beautiful? 83% off. What an amazing discount for Surfshark VPN. And you can use it to be an American patriot who won't let any government tell them what they can and cannot access. Isn't that right, Sparky? Isn't that right, Fabian?
No, because NordVPN is the only VPN that is actually.
Okay, so now we're going to go into this topic. The floor is open. Surfshark VPN code DBTV, 83% off and 3 free months. Isn't that beautiful? You can access all the restricted content and protect yourself from government monitoring. Okay, who wants to start us off?
Look, the idea that you're banning, and I think Stardust mentioned inciting violence, that's illegal speech. It's not even though I'm an absolutist, I still understand, yes, you can't incite, and of course, that's not going to be allowed. The problem is, Anthony Fauci is guilty of misinformation. So anyone who has ever played Dr. Fauci saying anything, they could actually be held accountable under these type of ideas, because Anthony Fauci spread mass misinformation. And
Do you have an
That wasn't
example?
really misinformation. That was developing information, right? Like as more information
Like
came.
Fauci, but name one.
Huh?
Yeah, no,
Name one.
I'm still gonna say what I was saying before.
Yeah. What did Fauci lie about?
He said masks work. And no,
Oh,
they
so
don't.
you think that masks don't work?
No.
Which is famously why surgeons don't use them.
Wait,
kidding,
wait.
Boy.
We gotta let Parker.
So
Parker
let's-
hasn't talked that much. I want to let Parker talk.
I can send you multiple different peer-reviewed studies that show that they are effective against stopping the spread of COVID-19.
They
What would you be
good-
basing that claim
They
off
are
of?
good at limiting the spittle, but they are not small enough to stop viral transmission.
How
Okay,
does
before-
coronavirus
before-
spread? How
Stop.
does it
No. Stop. Sprout. Parker hasn't
This
talked
is
at
why
all.
they have those
okay?
bans.
Stop.
How does it stop the
Parker is
spread?
talking. Okay.
COVID mainly spreads through attaching itself to water droplets, and the masks stop the spread of those water droplets to a specific degree, of course. So, I mean, can you explain to me how it's not? Because not all the particles are that size.
I'm sorry, what?
Not all the
What'd you
particles
say?
are that size. The main
You're
way
right,
that
you're right.
coronavirus
No, it does.
spreads
It does
is by
help
attaching itself to
slow.
water droplets.
It does
which are
help slow
bigger.
the spread, but there is a lot of things that Anthony Fauci has come out that he even knew was misinformation when he disseminated it.
Oh, so
Like-
you're
Don't
walking
back
that back
down.
now.
No,
Can we just
emails.
acknowledge
And
that
you
you're
even
walking
see
that
where
back
they were
now?
talking about things like lab leak and stuff.
Don't
Okay.
no, don't.
So if
don't-
you're going to talk about what misinformation is, you can look at the U.S. government, who is one of the biggest purveyors of misinformation. They tell the media what to say, and they just do it. It happens all the
Okay,
time.
still, but you're changing the topic. We were talking about Fauci, and you never gave an actual reason why. You're just using
Well,
that point to like bolster your own argument.
Parker, it's impossible for Fauci to not have lied on that because he said that they were nothing more than a quote social placebo, and then later said that you needed masks, and it wasn't because the science.
Nothing more than a
changed.
when was the social placebo? When did he say that?
This was very early in the pandemic response.
Yeah.
So,
pull up
so
every
what do you mean? What do you mean that the
argument
science didn't?
Research
What do you mean that the
okay.
science didn't change? They had more evidence on the efficacy of masks in relation to coronavirus. Like it took them time to get that data. So I mean, what are you
Right, and
talking about?
again-
Like, at the beginning,
and-
also, like people always bring this up all the time. At the beginning, they needed masks for medical professionals, and they
So
didn't
they
have
lied
the
to the
supply of
American
masks to
people?
allow for everyone to use it at that point. So when they were stating at the
So your
very
defense is
beginning,
that he lied for a good reason now.
Yeah, it's
That's not
okay.
a
It's
lie.
okay.
It's not
I
a lie.
lied
They didn't
for, I
have the
lied
specific
so
data.
surgeons can
You
have
heard
Stop,
what I
stop,
said.
stop,
Be
stop.
fair.
Okay, everybody, shut up. We're not going to start jumping on each other, okay, and making it so one person asks a question, then you ask a question, then ask a question. I'll just start muting. To be clear, I'm not gonna put up with that. Okay, so Fabian says something, then Parker tried to respond, then Aircraft Sparky got on him. So I want to have Parker respond before Aircraft Sparky jumps on him. And I'm gonna start writing down names. Sprout, but then we're gonna move back to the actual question after this interaction is done.
So like, did you want to go? Like, I was just responding to your point because
Aircraft
again
Sparky, right?
they never like lied. I was just stating that they have new data. So
No. See, he actually came out and said that he lied to the American people to ensure that the medical community were afforded all the masks. Okay, so if it's completely all fine and justified to lie to the people, for the government to lie to the people, so we can make sure that the elites get the masks, the people we want to get the masks to get them. Basically, you're supporting misinformation. Great.
again,
job.
no, that's not it at all. That's literally not it. Can you explain to me, like, show me where he said that specifically? Like,
Alright, so-
I can look up to see that. That's all I'm
Yeah,
asking
yeah,
for.
yeah. He
So
can,
I'm gonna,
I guess that's
I'm gonna
fine.
bring us back to this topic. You can DM wherever Fauci said. I'm gonna bring us kind of back to the topic. But Dylan, when he was advertising his VPN, proved my exact point, right?
Mhm.
That banning someone off of a platform does nothing but raise the awareness for that person. So it basically raises their popularity, and people are more interested in what they
sure.
or what they're going to say. So if the best way to actually get done with misinformation is to fight it head to head with facts. And I
Like
believe
Milo
that
Yiannopoulos, like
the
Stefan
truth will win.
Molyneux.
And if your viewers hear you say these facts and be able to deconstruct their argument and be able to break it down piece by piece and prove it wrong, then the viewers would be more capable of being able to do that next time if they meet someone who's saying those same exact points. So I 100% think that this disinformation ban should not be happening, and that we should be more proactive as a community and fight these conspiracy theories, if you believe it's a conspiracy theory, head to head, and try and bring your own set of your facts. That way you can correctly break it down piece by piece and show how it's wrong.
How do you combat an epistemologically crippled conspiracy theory with more data?
It's actually really easy, right? Because it's
like
very fun. It's
literally
like,
impossible.
Oh
No,
yeah, we
it's-
saw
it's
it
not
happen
because-
right now on this panel with the mask. So I mean, it really helped.
Right. Well, no, I mean, it's very simple, right? Like when you make scientific claims and then you debate about those scientific claims with other scientific claims. Like this happens all of the time. This idea that like the
Except the
COVID
countervailing
misinformation-
claims of COVID are not scientific and not appreciated or accepted
that's-
by the
that's
medical
fucking
community.
stupid.
And they're
That's just
usually
fucking dumb.
and they're not accepted by the medical community. And then the conspiracy theorists look at that as
Is that how
an
science works? Acceptance by the medical community?
people specifically that yes. That
Oh,
the
okay.
consensus,
Well, then you also you're stupid
consensus
and
in
you don't
academia
understand-
is
you don't
literally
understand
science.
or anything. What do you get?
No, you.
Right. Well, so again, like there are tons of things that have been considered conspiracy theories that there was plenty of scientists who were censored or pushed off of platforms were saying that then become knowledge. The blood clots in J&J was a thing. There was plenty of scientists and researchers and medical doctors saying, hey, when it comes to AstraZeneca and when it comes to the Pfizer vaccine and Moderna, we're seeing in young men higher rates of issues when it comes to pericarditis and myocarditis. That was
Which
a
is also
conspiracy
worse.
theory and wrong. But then we found out that no,
It
in
wasn't a
younger men,
conspiracy theory.
you're more likely to get myocarditis and pericarditis from the
What that
vaccine
was
than you are from COVID.
over-reporting. That was a misreading of a stat and over-reporting of it. So we're different.
No,
That's
it's
more.
not.
That's
No,
more
it's not.
misinformation.
No,
It
it's
is.
not.
So
That's
people-
not more misinformation.
People
I mean,
broadly.
like, if you
I
need
don't
Okay,
want to
stop,
relitigate.
stop,
I don't want to
stop,
relitigate
stop,
every
stop,
little.
stop.
Are we gonna have to
Mythic.
reparse every?
Okay. So you're both yelling over each other. I can't hear anything. No one can hear anything. I don't want to have to do that again. Okay. So who's asking who a question? I don't even know who's asking who a question anymore.
Well, so there's some disinformation that's happened in this panel, so I want to make sure Dylan doesn't get banned, right? You are more likely to get myocarditis as a young man from COVID than you are from the vaccine.
Exactly.
No,
True.
that is not true.
It
It
is.
According to
That
what?
is not
Absolutely true.
The
According to
UK
what?
has released.
This is
okay,
a
would you
disinformation
prefer
in debunking in action, guys.
Would you
He's so
prefer the
convinced.
Okay,
would you
stop.
prefer
You're
the
doing it.
convinced
You're
by
doing
the
it again.
data.
You guys are doing it again.
Would you
Okay.
prefer that I refer you to Vinay Prasad, that is someone that is looking at these studies, since you don't trust my ability to read the study? Maybe an epidemiologist is someone that you should listen to when they make that claim, right?
Can you give me a
Okay, okay, so-
what was the name you
Vinay
gave me?
Prasad. Vinay Prasad.
I can't
Okay,
spell
so-
that. Can you spell
Okay,
it
okay,
for me?
okay. Can we?
It's just like it sounds, actually.
Okay,
VIN.
stop. Everybody stop. Okay, so I did not want this to just become a debate on COVID, and that's what it's becoming very quickly. Okay,
Mhm.
and so what we're gonna do now is no more debating COVID. Isn't that crazy? You can't debate
I'm all for it.
any of the specifics of COVID. You just have to debate misinformation on how it from something and how it could affect platform and whether it should be removed. Okay, that is what we're going to be debating moving forward. If someone starts debating the specifics of COVID again, I'm just going to mute you for 5 minutes. Okay, and you're going to have to sit there. And I might even like full screen you so everybody in Twitch chat can see you as you just sit there in silence. Okay, so got it? Does everybody understand?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So debate misinformation, not the specifics.
All right, so can someone tell me how facing an argument with facts is not going to be more effective than banning someone off to where they can just go somewhere else, and even more people are going to follow them somewhere else because they've been banned off that platform that got the national attention, and now everyone wants to hear what they're saying because they've been banned? Can someone explain to me why facts works less than banning?
Because people aren't able to articulate what the facts are, and people who are confident can go out there and muddy the waters in a way that seems specious, right? That seems clever or smart on its face, but is not backed by any medical science and not backed by anything. But the way it's delivered and the confidence of the speaker just foments doubt, which adds to the reduces the net utility in the world by making the epidemiologist's job harder, especially in the context.
But who is the arbiter of truth? That's really the question.
Usually the medical society and like literally peer-reviewed science, the mass. So it's a fluid, it's a dynamic thing, and it changes all the time. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Is science settled on a consensus basis, or is it actual individuals standing up and challenging the established quo that actually causes advances in science?
It's a balance.
It's Dr. Fauci. He said, I am the science.
It's a balance.
The science!
It's only Fauci, nobody else.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's it.
You know, this panel is really changing my views on this, like, in real time. It's unbelievable.
Can I address what Sprout said?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
No,
so
it's illegal. Not allowed.
okay, fair enough. Damn it.
Continue. No, you can go.
Appreciate it. Yeah, so why data? Why can that actually be a problem? Why we're just throwing people the data book? As an example, something that I found as a data argument here on Twitch that has been really hot is that intuitive deduction sometimes will trump data for a lot of people. Example is public housing. There is a claim by data that public housing is actually cheaper for a city to do than having all of these other different auxiliary programs because of the fact that you're not throwing people in jail, you're not, or for loitering, things like that. I can get into the particulars of that. But if I go up to people and I say public housing is actually cheaper intuitively people are going to tell you, no, you're wrong, get screwed. And there's no conversation there. You have to actually sell it. And data sometimes works, but sometimes it doesn't. It is part of presentation and salesmanship in telling people how that data works and how it's aligned.
Okay, so at a Twitch platform such like this, there's 1.9 thousand people watching Dylan Burns right now. I'm not counting the
Amen.
rest of. I'm not counting the rest of everybody who has viewers. I'm not counting the rest of them. But just Dylan Burns alone, there's 1.9 thousand people watching. Flex as much as you want. So with that being said, when me and you are having a discussion here, if one of us brings up data and the other one just says no and doesn't listen, the audience is probably going to be more influenced by the data than the person that said fuck off.
But
It's not hard. We're talking about a platform. We're not talking about going on the street and talking to random people. We're talking about a platform such as Twitch, to where there's one person talking to another, and it's streamed live for other viewers.
So, like, I get where you're going with this. And number one, I may be a lot more doomer on this one than you are, and that's fine. That's just a difference in opinion. But on the other side of that is that people have recency bias and basically just bias in general, to where if I said, hey, this particular party has done really well with the economy, you will have people openly say, regardless of whatever the fucking numbers are, that they did worse. Like, we have seen, particularly in the last 10 years, how strong people's personal biases can get, where you can slap them with data all damn day, and actually they will retrench and go further from what the data says if it is not conveyed to them in a constructive way.
There's always those people, yes. But what we're talking about is misinformation, and when they're talking about misinformation, they're talking mostly about the viewers. So there's always going to be those people. There's always going to be those viewers that want to go on the hard part of, no, I'm just going to deny everything. We're talking mainly central people that aren't dedicated to one side or the other, because you're not going to influence a person's dedicated to one side or dedicated to the other side. What you're trying to influence is the middle group, and that middle group, I believe, is going to be more influenced by facts than the person who says fuck off or tries to build themselves a deeper trench when they're faced with the facts.
Okay, yeah.
Do you think like school history teachers should if they ever teach kids about the Holocaust, should they also spend an equal amount of time teaching them about Holocaust denial? So they can hear about Sprout. Do you think why not get both perspectives?
Completely incomparable. How many times are you going to bring up?
Wait, stop. Okay, wait, stop. That was a question to Sprout, and Sprout was trying to respond. Fabian, I'll let you to respond to you, and Stardust, I still got you. No worries.
There's a huge difference between education and a platform. And I'm actually like flabbergasted that education got brought up in this. There's a huge difference in education and a platform. A platform is something like this, where it's not education, right? I'm not saying that down and teaching people. I'm not paid to teach people. I'm not licensed to teach people, right? But what I am is I'm speaking my mind, and people are listening to me speak my mind. All right. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about teachers. We're not talking about the education system. I'd be more than welcome to talk about the next topic if Dylan wants to change the topic. But what we are talking about is misinformation on Twitch. I don't think there's very many people on Twitch that claim to be licensed teachers and only teach on Twitch.
No, I was just so I can like unflabbergast you. Like I'm maybe kind of like devil's advocating a little bit, but I want to like why don't we though? That's what I want to know. Is like why don't they do it in education?
So the question is, Loner. So look, education aside, it's a totally different subject.
No,
Here
I want to
on
know why
Twitch-
they don't do it in education. It should be a simple question, right? It should be a simple
They
question.
don't do it in education because it's not factual.
That's it. Okay. So, like, but I thought you said like we should. If you're going to say that you want to like ban like opposing narratives, then doesn't that make it more popular?
I don't want to ban it. I don't want to ban anybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so earlier you
want to
said
ban it
that
from like education, though, right?
Education is about facts. Education is about facts. It's not a platform. I'm not taking someone's speech away because they are given a book and have to teach from that book. I'm not taking someone's speech away because of that. When I'm taking someone's speech away is where I take someone off a platform and say, you can't speak on this platform anymore because I don't agree with what you're saying.
Okay, one moment, guys. So before you guys respond, I have to go walk away for a minute. Please, everybody, follow the rules. I will be back. Chat will tell me if you broke the rules. Okay.
Let's all
People
talk over each
speak
other.
on
Real
these
quick.
issues as if they're teachers, like as if they're reporting on the facts all the time. People, that's just what people. That's like the epitome of like a Twitch politics streamer is. They're speaking on stuff like they're the facts.
Real
So-
quick.
Also,
real
not to
quick.
mention a
So,
lot
real
of
quick.
people
No,
actually cling on to-
Real quick. While he's gone.
It's never
all right?
real quick, but okay.
Uh-oh.
No, okay. NordVPN is the only VPN that has ever been challenged by the FBI and has
Yeah.
won court proceedings by the FBI demanding.
Oh, he got muted.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay,
Popular
Sprout.
library. Shut up.
Hey, Sprout.
Hey,
Earlier on, you were saying specifically that you should be able to combat misinformation or combat narratives with facts, and yet I don't want to make a semantic argument here. I'm not a fucking gotcha, Andy. But you said basically that those aren't counterfactuals or whatever. So now, which is it? Is it that you aren't able to speak eloquently on that thing, or that are you just proposing a counter narrative? Is that utility in it? Because how is it facts if it's not an opinion?
Are you
know what I mean?
bringing up
I had a
education? Are you bringing up education again?
Basically, yes. In your answer to that, you said it's misinformation, but I said, what's going to differentiate that between the counter narratives that you're providing on a platform like Twitch for entertainment purposes? So for entertainment purposes or otherwise, you're still forwarding, signal boosting possible misinformation.
Okay, so what I'm still saying is that your viewers, if you trust your viewers, I guess, should be able to disseminate the difference between facts and non-factual information, or someone saying "fuck off," I'm not going to listen, digging themselves a bigger trench. I'm not going to sit here and debate education because that's not the topic. If you like to talk about education some other time, feel free to hit me up in Discord, and we'll have a wonderful conversation about education. But that's not the topic right now. We're talking about people getting banned off of Twitch for
Okay,
misinformation.
so Sprout, I asked you about education because you said the point in education being different is that teachers are in an authoritative position over like facts. They've got an authority over kids, and like because it's about facts, right? So what happens when we live in a world where you can probably imagine that a lot of people actually trust social media creators and people on platforms more than they trust institutions like education, or more than they trust mainstream media, or more than they trust official narratives or studies, right? So what happens then? Like, what happens when like social media creators have more authority than educators? Shouldn't they be held to should they still be held to a lower standard?
I think that they shouldn't be banned. Like I said, I think that you're trying to convince the middle ground. I think that there's a certain part of the audience that's not going to be changed their mind. I think there's another certain part of the audience that's not going to change their mind. It's
Is
all
there
about the middle
social
ground.
media?
It's all
Okay, but
it's all
that
about the
didn't-
middle ground in between the two, right? It's
But
all
that
about that
didn't-
middle ground. Even in elections, it's all about that middle ground. How much of that middle ground will vote for this person, and how much of that middle ground will vote for that person. Now, when you're talking about that, most of that middle ground will understand facts and will be able to look at things logically. People who are not going to accept facts and are just dead set in what they believe, talking to them and showing the facts will do absolutely
good
nothing.
point.
I 100% agree. But
It's true.
that middle ground is going to move as you show facts, as you break down the argument, as you show this is wrong, and break it down and show how it's wrong that way. That is how that middle ground is going to move. Not because you ban someone, because when you ban someone, that middle ground is going to decide, oh, I'm going to go to this new platform and watch what they're saying there where they're not banned, because I want to hear what they have to say, because obviously it was something to get banned for. So I want to hear what they have to say instead of moving the middle ground with facts.
So if
There
you wanted
is-
to
there-
get bigger, you would get banned, wouldn't you? If getting banned draws more attention to you, then
Well, it depends on who
should
you
people try to
are.
get
I
banned?
mean,
Like, if they want a bigger following?
It depends. If you're a nobody and you get like low viewership, you're probably not going to get very much attention from getting banned. No one's
What if
going to
you're,
realize
like-
you were banned very little. But if you're a somebody, or you're trying to you have high viewership or stuff like that, then you're probably going to get viewers that come from where you used to be, and you're probably going to get more viewers than you used to get.
Like Milo Yiannopoulos or Stefan Molyneux, whose entire careers tanked.
Milo Yiannopoulos got actually a
they,
huge. Milo Yiannopoulos actually got a huge viewership boost after he got banned. It was just following that he wasn't able to keep those viewers.
yeah.
Let's
So the
talk about
ban
Alex
is what
Jones.
hurt. The ban is what hurt his audience, right?
No, the ban is not what hurt his audience. He actually got a boost after he got banned. He was not able to maintain those viewers.
Because
Yes,
he
I'm
didn't
gonna
have a
tell you right
platform
now-
where he could maintain viewers.
Yes,
right?
I'm going to tell you right now that me as Alex Jones, after being banned off of YouTube, 11 million strong individuals on Infowars.com that are ready to have 1776 commence again.
That's actually
Oh
good.
my god, that's great. Hey, Sprout, can I wrap up that conversation I was having with you? Because like I
Yeah,
don't
go ahead.
disagree with, I don't disagree with you on the middle ground part. Like the real danger here that I consistently see, and this has gotten really bad in the last 20 years, is the effectiveness of rhetorician, where you don't have people talk or give like a fuck off as a quip, but moreover, it is something that appeals to either a moral sense or like a skewed objective sense against the data. As an example, 100 years ago, we had the evolution conversation. That was literally the Scopes trial and all that. The term "I'll be a monkey's uncle" literally comes from that. It was a quip. It was like, oh yeah, evolution can't be real because that makes me a monkey's uncle. You know, it's intuitive, it's quippy, and that is the primary tool of misinformation. Not actually changing the data, not misrepresentation the data, but to openly quip it to be invalid.
Yeah, there is to speak on a lot of things. You asked by why education is important, and you said they should be able to parse the facts. There is about 10%, 8 to like a 13% of an audience that's going to be doxastically open, meaning that they can have their minds changed by that. The problem is what you're positioning there is like that there's two equal academic or smart powers, which is the whole of a scientific medical consensus versus some fucking Twitch Andy. Those two things are not equal. Number one. Number two, there is a little bit of a Streisand effect wherein that if somebody gets banned off a platform, it draws attention for them if they're of a big enough size to be noticed and is noteworthy in the media. That will draw people there. Number three, there's utility in being wrong often, early and often, about those things. Conspiracy entrepreneurs can make a whole lane for themselves. I think it's in Twitch's best interest to get rid of the conspiracy entrepreneurs who are literally trafficking misinformation to onboard people who are disaffected by the society as a result of longitudinal failures of the system and the education system. So it does ultimately go back to academia. However, a stopgap measure to prevent the worst actors who are conspiracy entrepreneurs from doing this is just Twitch clipping 100 or so people. I think that's a pretty surgical strike on misinfo.
I think there's two things that we're not talking about here that are extremely important and relevant to this conversation. Number one, we keep shifting this conversation as if there is a presumption that the powers that be, the medical community, the government, the state, the large corporate powers are kind of like automatically going to be in the right here because they control the narrative. When we just know from history over and over and over again that there are very unpopular opinions that they do not appreciate, right? I mean, and so that's the first point. And the second point, when we're talking about deplatforming and its success, the amount of increased censorship online towards conservatives or towards anti-state activists and things of that nature that has grown has pushed a market of other types of platforms, right? And so, sure, we can talk about Milo Yiannopoulos when YouTube had a monopoly, which the left, hates monopolies unless, of course, the monopoly supports their political opinions. Then all of a sudden, monopolies are okay. But they're losing that strength of that monopoly, right? Viva Frey was doing Canadian trucker stuff with 50,000 viewers, and so the success of deplatforming isn't going to be a long-term success as we get more and more authoritarian with the types of individuals that we kick off of these platforms and push them to other platforms. And I think the greatest danger of that is that instead of being able to have conversations, what you're doing is creating echo chambers, right? Twitter gets more and more restrictive, and now we have to have a conservative version of Twitter and Twitter. YouTube gets more and more censorious, and now we have to have a conservative version of YouTube called Rumble or Odyssey instead. And as we do this, we're going to cause a lot more fucking problems than we solve than if we just stood by our liberal ideas of freedom of speech.
Anybody else want
Speechless.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. So, Scott, when it comes to this, I absolutely appreciate where you're at here, but also, do you think that the primary, I'll put it this way, the primary discourse within a society is largely ran by its institutions, right? It's not about like the individual making up their mind as much as it is more leadership and experts within their field are usually kind of coming to their own conclusions, and they kind of peddle it to the people at large. This was the job of Carl Sagan. This is the job of Stephen Hawking, right? Neil deGrasse Tyson's kind of taken that up as well, where it's like, hey, this is what's going on in science right now. This is what we're doing in astrophysics. They do the work, and then they actually kind of sell it to people. It's like, hey, this is what's going on. So here's the problem. If our institutions are even remotely questionable, whether it is that they are politically motivated, whether it is that they have kind of lost their, if you will, liberal doctrine, or if they are actively becoming activists in their own right, which clouds their judgment, is that a problem? Is that a concern where we might need to have, if you will, like an institutional misinformation pushback where one institution checks another?
Well, see, the problem
The-
here
the-
is that when you talk about science, right? One of in the community and things like that is that anybody that's been in like anybody with a bachelor's degree, right, has had some education on Thomas Kuhn and the idea of paradigm shifts, right? A medical community, a scientific community has a narrative, an idea. That most people agree to this, right? And there's one or two scientists that are skeptics that challenge this idea, and sometimes they turn out to be right, and the community kind of starts to shift slowly, and then there's a giant paradigm shift.
When those
you start
paradigm shifts happen, they happen in academia and not from a Twitch Andy. You're speaking to so
Okay,
you're
well, you
talking
can say
specifically
Twitch
about
Andy.
a Twitch. You're talking about a Twitch Andy parroting someone else who's also not using the academic modalities to do that paradigm shift that you're referring to, that
No.
were traditionally done through
No.
academia.
No, you're just saying Twitch Andy and then just having an appeal to authority, when what I'm talking about is that in a new
Peer
age of
review
the
is not
internet,
an appeal to authority.
Now, what he means is like hack epidemiologists who compare like COVID measures to Hitler's Third Reich. That's what you were talking
Mhm,
about
mhm.
with the
Right, right.
myocarditis claim.
Yeah, right. Hack epidemiologists. Got it. I'm not going to go into that because we're not supposed to talk about COVID, and I've already been silenced multiple times on this specific debate topic. But
I
no, what
will
I'm
censor
talking,
you. Yes.
yeah, I got it. What I'm talking about is that there is cultural shifts and things as well, right? We're not just talking about science specifically. It seems like maybe we're stuck a little bit on the COVID misinformation because we got heated about it, right? And we're talking and dancing around it a little bit, but we're talking about things in terms of elections is a big part of this. One of the major bullet points is civic misinformation and undermining of the political process, right? So we're talking about anti-state rhetoric or anarchist rhetoric or the freedom convoy, or we're talking about COVID, or we're talking about other forms of what might be deemed harmful misinformation, right? And opinions can be really unpopular, and there can be educators or just talking heads and people that talk, hey guys, have you heard about this? Things can spread in a cultural zeitgeist, right? And ideas can spread that way. Do they get to more people? This paradigm shift isn't always going to be lock and step and stay in academia. That's just not the world that we live in anymore, I don't think.
Especially
Okay,
when
so
you've
you went
got
back to academia
educators.
at the end there. Okay, I agree.
I
There's a
said they're
difference.
not going to stay there.
Yeah,
Okay.
you've got educators actually doing things like content creation. And look, when you're talking about
I
the difference between when you talk about the difference between like Twitch and maybe a classroom. In a classroom environment, you actually have to follow a specific curriculum because your license to do that, your professional license is actually being jeopardized if you go against what the
In that
curriculum
classroom,
teaches.
your audience is 30 people, not like thousands.
I've seen audiences as big as 500. I go to college.
In a classroom?
Learn
Okay.
classrooms are bigger.
In a classroom,
Um,
okay, sure. In a college, maybe 500 people, but we've got Twitch content creators with 10K viewers, 50K viewers who are saying the most stupid shit I've ever heard in my life.
Yes, and they should be allowed to say that. And
Well,
look,
I mean,
They're
if
start
your
speaking on it like
audience
they're
just blindly
authority.
follows
Wait,
them,
wait,
that's more
wait.
about them.
Okay. Okay. Wait. There's three people talking at once. I'll have Stardust
Super quick.
respond to that, and then we'll go to Fabian. Okay.
It'll be 3 seconds.
What
Okay.
am I
I'll count. I'll
responding
count. I'll
to?
count.
Okay, Stardust. If you're smart enough to tell that they're wrong, the
3
average
seconds.
person definitely can.
Okay. Stardust.
Oof.
No, they can't. Sorry, they can't. The answer is no. What am I responding to from Mashcraft over here?
Just talk about you, Aircraft Sparky.
Mashcraft, that's fucking good.
Yeah, I kind of tune out every time she speaks.
It's okay. I
So-
tune out every time Fabio
awesome.
Library speaks too. Weaponized boredom over here. So,
Mm.
yeah. Okay, I'm done. I mean, I guess there's nothing for me to respond to here.
There's a broad differentiation between the type of clearly definable medical misinformation that's going out for people who are often selling other prescriptive solutions, i.e., supplements, other medicine practices, other stuff. There's an entrepreneurial nature to a lot of the disinformation fomented by medical conspiracists. Okay, but then you raise a different point, which is the political stuff, and I think that's more of a gray area. Is when does political speech get violent? When does a having like an election narrative, when does that cross the threshold into fomenting violence or stuff like that? That's a more interesting niche issue, but I don't think that's the type of thing that's being forwarded. I think specifically QAnon and the articles I read about this Twitch ban, QAnon is referenced a lot in the type of epistemologically crippled conspiracy theory that people are going, where they're weaponizing people's sort of nonpartisan populist takes that are sort of reactionary to a part of a malaise they feel at the system, and so, which leads them to glom onto the most most harebrained shit about Hillary Clinton being a fucking secret satanic pedo and pedophile, fucking like human trafficking, other like really fringe weirdo shit.
Clearly, you haven't read the Finders documents by the FBI.
Yeah, look, all I know is during the election, you had people banned off of social media platforms for referring to the Hunter Biden laptop story, which later came out to be true. Like I said, what is misinformation today, 2 to 3 months down the road, may be the freaking truth. And if you don't allow it to actually get out there, then you will actually have violent reactions to it. Because when you see the state media, when you see social media and everything, and people continuously are being duped by the misinformation put out by the establishment, people will eventually get fed up, and then they will enact on that anger.
It's actually the Hunter Biden thing specifically. What they were getting banned for was posting his dick pics, like posting crack pipes and dick pics and weirdo shit on Twitter. It wasn't necessarily the narrative about. I would say that there was a convenient dismissal of that at the time because it looked like it was going to be bad for the Biden campaign, and I agree. The way they handled that was it looked like they were mitigating. They were working. A lot of the social media networks seemed to be working as a PR branch of the Biden administration over the upcoming Biden administration. Yeah. I will agree with that, but specifically, it looked like they were targeting people who were like sharing crack pipes and dick pics and like scattling Skittles on his dick and stuff.
So Mythic, are you not aware that the New York Post, the New York Post was it wasn't deleted and they weren't banned, but their post was not able to be shared, not able to be liked, not able to be commented on, which severely took it down in how many people saw it and timelines and stuff like that. So it's more like a shadow ban of that post, but the post was literally just saying that Hunter Biden's laptop had this on it, and it's confirmed to be Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, this post was mid-election. This article was mid-election, and a social media company decided, no, people don't need to hear about that. They don't need to hear about that, so we're just going to make sure it doesn't get out.
And they did ban the New York Post for like 24 hours on Twitter. What, like the second or third oldest periodical in America that's still going on today. That is huge. And that is just Twitter doing that. YouTube actually was banning people for talking about the story. I don't know. I don't think Twitch did, but I wasn't really doing much with Twitch that time.
I'm really glad that you brought up the Hunter Biden situation, right? Because Global Disinformation Index, the supposedly non-biased source that they're going to be using to help determine what is and isn't harmful misinformation. Claire Medford, the co-founder of the Global Disinformation Index, in an article where she was being interviewed with NPR, she was asked about the Hunter Biden censorship, and she pivoted away from the question, not talking about the Hunter Biden laptop, and instead talked about how Breitbart and Epoch Times should be considered, quote, hostile narratives against the election, and that almost all information about the January 6th incident and elections came from Russia Today and Sputnik, and was claiming that their organization could prove that all of the overwhelming majority, of all of the quote unquote misinformation about the election was coming from Russian propaganda, which we know is just made up bullshit and cope, and specifically told readers that if they wanted to get good information and they didn't want to be reading fake news, that they needed to read, quote, NPR, New York Times, Reuters, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post, right? This group is a fucking statist neoliberal fucking group that wants you to make sure that you shut up and you get all of your information from the trusted news that the state is very happy and hunky-dory with. This is not a non-biased group that is going to be determining what is and isn't harmful misinformation on Twitch.
They're also not the sole arbiter of what is misinformation on Twitch. They're working with a lot of partners. And true, there could be.
They're the only named one.
That is true. I don't even think they were named directly by Twitch. They were named in ancillary articles as maybe.
They're named in with an asterisk in the Twitch policy, saying that
Oh,
we're
really?
working. Yes.
Okay.
Specifically, they talked about the civic misinformation. There was an asterisk saying we're not doing this ourselves. We're working with groups, and then they named this group.
Okay, yeah, and so I think specifically, you're correct that looking into the motivations of the people who are the arbiters of the fact that is important. But I think broadly speaking, it doesn't affect the broader truth that a lot of people are unable to discern fact from fiction. They don't, because the education system is as such in this country where they do not have the context and they do not have the wherewithal or deductive reasoning or critical thinking skills to get from where they need to be to where the truth is from what their opinion is now by means of Twitch. So
I actually agree with all of that.
So the
problem is
a utilitarian thing. Exactly. Well, I think you just ban the worst actors. This is not has anyone in
right?
the
Who chooses who the worst actors are? Who chooses what's wrong and right?
I would.
And I started looking into the motivations, and I can prove that they're super biased.
I would be very curious to see who those 100 were as well. But I think they're QAnon people. Do you think that QAnon is a balanced, reasonable thing to go on about? Do you think that JFK Jr. is going to come back? Do you think JFK Jr. is going to come back from the dead? Do you think if a Twitch person was talking?
Well, don't ask me a question, and then.
Okay.
Well, no, like, look, I don't think that QAnon people are the most reasonable fucking people out there, right? But the problem here is who gets to choose what is dangerous and what's not dangerous. When you look into the group, the only group that they mention by name, they have tons and tons of articles talking about how we have to stop QAnon. They have an article talking about how we need to ban any anti-CRT discussions because it creates a pipeline to anti-LGBTQ content, right? So now we can't talk about fucking why CRT is bad. We can't talk against Marxism. They talk specifically about far right. This group also has articles that are anti-cryptocurrency because cryptocurrency is allowing the far right to be able to fund themselves and misinformation groups. It's so clearly and patently and obviously a fucked organization that is going to be choosing what is and isn't misinformation, that's going to be supporting mainstream left-wing narratives. And that's why you're not going to see Has banned for misinformation. You're not going to see Tankies banned for misinformation. You're going to see right-wingers banned for misinformation.
Well, you're talking about the mainstream media like monolith or the American government, but Has is literally speaking out against both of those things like every day. Like, so I don't know, like his claims are completely in contradiction. That's why these things are not a monolith. It's the same with social media platforms. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the stats for Facebook and how much like partisan right there is compared to partisan left. The right dwarfs the left in Facebook presence. When it comes to Twitter shadow banning, there's the only evidence you're ever going to give me for Twitter shadow banning favoring conservatives is conjecture. Like, Twitter said it was a technical glitch, and one of the people who actually got banned.
Fucking
Stop. Let him finish.
Which you have. Do you even know which incident I'm talking about? I didn't think
no, because it's a go-to for Twitter.
And your go-to is conjecture with no evidence. Okay, that's fine.
Are you talking about New York Post?
One of the people who got banned, like in one of Twitter's shadow bans, were Democrat politicians. So,
are you going to answer the question or not?
What question?
Was it New York Post?
What about New York Post?
What you were referring to?
No, this was
the technical
2018.
glitch. The technical.
I was talking about
glitch
2018.
About 2018.
Which
what
one?
about 2018?
No, you have to. Like, the problem is that there's been dozens and dozens of supposed technical glitches that
You can't
censored
just
or
name
shadow
it.
banned conservatives. You have
You
to
can't
be
just name a
specific,
year.
because we're talking
You
about
can't just name a
dozens
year.
of cases.
So
Again,
what specific case are you referring to?
I'm just wanting to see like something besides like just like conjecture when it
So
comes to.
wait,
so
you
you have
don't
a
even
bullet point. You're pivoting, bullshitting.
Post. You don't even know what post you're referring to.
New York
What
Post.
post are you referring to?
Guys, he
Hang on.
downloaded from his NPC drive the talking point, right? It's a technical glitch. And now that we're challenging him, he doesn't know which
You just
technical
quoted an
point.
NPC thing about myocarditis. You've been like,
Woo!
what are you talking about?
No,
Why,
no,
where's the
seriously.
NPC talking point?
Respond to me. Respond to me.
What happened to
What
that 5
tweet-
minute?
What
I
tweet are
haven't-
you referring to?
I'm not talking about, okay, I'm talking about an incident in 2018. Hang on.
That's a
I'll
year.
send it to you in the chat.
2018 what?
Yeah.
Hey, let's
How-
let him finish. Let's let him finish. He'll
It was
bring
about
up.
Twitter shadow banning prominent Republicans. It was like a claim that was going out. It was a tweet referring to the article in. Hang on.
Right. Well, once you get your story straight, like let's continue elsewhere. I think Mythic would love to speak again. You looked like you were keying up a couple times.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, this seems cut and dry. I don't know. So no, actually, no. Someone else start something, and if I hear something, I'll react to it. I did have something to say, but I forgot what it was now.
Okay. We're going to Loner, you want to finish up because we can wrap up and go to the last topic of the night.
1 second. Almost
Okay.
got it.
Got it. We can do ending statements, and you can say it part of your ending statement. So we're gonna start with Sparky.
Look, censorship when it comes to the idea of misinformation. If you're coming to Twitch as your only mode of information, that's a you problem. You're wrong. Obi-Wan Kenobi said, "Strike me down and I'll become more powerful than you could possibly imagine." And look, we see this happen with individuals like Alex Jones, for Christ's sakes. Look, his personal website blew up because he was censored because he said a lot of dumb things. But the Alex Jones was right jar gets fuller and fuller at every couple of months. And then like recently you see like Salty Cracker has been banned off of YouTube. Now Rumble is exploding because of it. Look, there is such thing as the Streisand effect. I don't care what information a creator is putting out. It is not the creator's responsibility for what the chat does and everything. I think it's ridiculous. And when you talk about censoring information, you're basically doing the same thing that 1939 German people were doing. I mean, for Christ's sakes, you're doing the exact same thing. And yes,
Are you
America has
seriously
engaged
bringing
in
up
that kind of
Stardust?
stuff too.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Again, ending statements. But I'll throw it over to Stardust next since she had such a visceral reaction.
Dude, why do we have to bring up fucking?
I can fill in while you're. Yeah.
why don't you
So,
go?
yeah, the incident I was referring to was when a bunch of Republican politicians claimed that they were collectively shadow banned on Twitter in July of 2018. To which Twitter responded and showed evidence that some of the people who got banned in that 600,000 account purge were Democrats. That's all I was saying. Like, but I mean, if like, and then I was
So-
also just responding, and before you interrupted that, I was also just responding to this general claim that whenever people bring in these buzzwords like the state and the media and the medical community and the consensus, these are not monoliths. There's conflicts within these groups all the time. Facebook very disproportionately represents Republicans. And yeah, you can say Twitter probably favors leftists because you'd imagine they probably view hate speech as something that they like to ban, and Republicans and right wingers tend to do that more. So yeah, you can say, but like treating it as like this kind of like big state monolith, like these are private companies with different interests. I don't think there's
So
like
what
any
you think Zuckerberg?
specific
You think
bias.
Zuckerberg favors Republicans?
Why? Okay.
I don't know if
wait,
I don't know if
stop,
Zuckerberg.
Stop.
I don't
stop.
know.
No,
I never.
Don't.
Stop.
Okay. So, Sprout, you've been on my show multiple times. I'm gonna think that this must be like while you were like helping the refugees, like there must have been some mortar attack or something, and so now there's like maybe like a little like shaking in the head. But the thing is, during any statements we do not talk. Almost muted Stardust. I had to mute you. The next person who does it is just gonna be like timed out for 5 minutes. Okay? Wonderful. Lona, you can finish your ending statement. Then we're moving to Scott.
Okay. I didn't say anything about the personal views of Mark Zuckerberg. I said that what happens with Facebook is that there's an overrepresentation of right-wing viewpoints. I don't think that's a very controversial thing to say. Do you have a counterclaim?
No, don't encourage him.
Okay, Stardust. All right.
Okay. Next is gonna be. I'm gonna just go around the room. Scott.
Yeah. So, in closing, this Twitch harmful misinformation, if it was coming from a good place, I would understand that. If it was coming from a place of like certain things are legitimately dangerous, such as giving the wrong information about where a forest fire might be, right? These things are perfectly understandable. But what is occurring is instead is a policy that was very clearly designed to specifically attack certain narratives that Twitch and the Trusted News Initiative didn't like. And those things dealt with COVID-19 and vaccine efficacy. I myself, despite having debated several people, including doctors, on COVID and vaccines and efficacy, have had to change my overlays and some of those things because I'm worried about my channel being banned because they're specifically targeting people with certain opinions. Moving forward, they only mention one group that they're using, and that's the Global Disinformation Index. I've showed you how their articles don't say anything against Antifa. They don't say anything against rhetoric that you hear that is conspiracy theories or misinformation from left-wing variety. Instead, they talk about QAnon. They talk about banning people from not being able to talk about CRT. They cite the ADL as this great source when they talk to NPR. But when you go even deeper and you look at who works for the Global Disinformation Index, what you find is people like Olaf Steinfort, who works with the Trusted News Initiative and is funded many of his programs by left-wing anti-gun activists. You look at Finn Heinrich, who works specifically for the Open Society by George Soros. You look at Scott Hale working for Me Dan, who his one boss above him is Edward Bice. And that company, as well as Edward Bice, both work with the World Economic Forum. Edward Bice is on the Global Agenda Council, as well as on the Council Role of Faith in Systemic Global Change. You're talking about them going to an obviously very left-wing neoliberal perspective that is funded by the Open Society and the World Economic Forum to try and determine what is and isn't harmful misinformation. It's very clearly a political attack and purge on specific political viewpoints on Twitch, and it has nothing to do with actual harmful misinformation. And that's why you need freedom of speech.
Mythic.
Why didn't you mention Soros?
Loner.
It's okay.
He did mention Soros. Mythic.
Oh, okay.
I think this is very demonstrative of why we need these type of bans. And I think that if they're done surgically, I think that this type of thing is actually more useful than the stupid little notification at the bottom, which just gets memed on. It doesn't do anything. No one's like, oh, look, a Wikipedia article underneath a YouTube video. Oh, look at this. There's an asterisk in the corner of this thing. Oh, look at this. Some things that may not be true about, there's a lot of misinformation about COVID. Oh, wow. How informative. Anyways, let me go on and listen to this guy talk about how it's a part of the reptilian agenda or whatever. I think that those type of things don't do anything else. And if you're going to do anything at all, just literally clipping the people, the 100 or so people who are just unabashedly lying, grifting, telling like blatant untruths, spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt, filling the zone with shit, selling or shilling the worst propaganda towards just entrepreneurial success, towards clicks on a website or selling supplements. I think that doing strategic nukes of 100 people is probably good for the net utility of society. We should be cautious who we let determine who those 100 people are, though. I would see that. I think that is very true.
Sprout.
So yes, like I said before, facts is going to be able to do this a lot better than banning. Again, we're talking about the middle group. The side groups are never going to have their mind changed. So facts going to do a lot better than banning. With that being said, the idea that Zuckerberg was more kind to liberals. Okay, he's the owner of Facebook. So the idea that Zuckerberg and his staff are more kind to liberals is insane, to say the least. But moving past that, Twitter's technical glitches are hilarious. I think they blamed New York Post for a technical glitch as well. It seems to be their go-to response when they're called out for banning someone who should have been banned is a technical glitch. But yeah, that's about all I got to say. Is banning's bad. Fight them with facts.
Okay, Loner will be muted for 5 minutes. Sorry, Loner. That's just how it is. Throwing it over to Parker.
So I definitely think that there are instances in which we do need to ban people who are spreading like specifically like hateful messages. But it really just depends like who we decide to pick for that specifically. So I mean, I would like to do it on like a case by case basis. But when we're talking about like just like general like COVID misinformation or other types of misinformation like that, I think the best way to deal with it still would be to give facts, like specifically like the points that were brought up earlier about like the myocarditis and the mask not working. I feel like just giving the facts based on this matter and letting people determine based on that will be the best to determine what's determine how people interact with that. But specifically, I just want to end this with like Sparky, did you find that that source?
Can't answer that, Sparky. Sorry. You can answer that during the intro to the next segment. Okay. Stardust?
What I just don't understand is whenever we're talking about disinformation, or we're talking about masking, or we're talking about vaccines, or we're talking about COVID, somebody always has to bring up Nazi Germany. Why? Why? We don't need to bring up Hitler for everything, guys. It's not necessary. Really? Really? You know what Nazis did? They spread disinfo. You know what commies did? They also spread disinfo. Everybody spread disinfo. Okay? Shut up! And then as far as the technical glitches, what do you think is part of running a tech company? There are gonna be technical glitches, guys. And then I guess the last thing I would say is that, when we're trying to determine what type of disinfo harms people, and what to get rid of, there are going to be people who get caught up in it, who are innocent, who get banned off of a platform for the wrong reasons. But that's like very similar to how a lot of things work. We have to find a line to draw somewhere, right? Yeah, I don't know what to say. I'm not going to be lectured though by somebody who has the brain of a cold mashed potatoes on what the average person can handle and what the average person can determine is disinformation. It's not happening. The cold mashed potatoes over here is trying to tell me that it's Hitler and it's Nazi Germany. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Stardust. Now throw it up to Tiberius to wrap up the outros.
Yeah, so I'm not really moved on what I originally said, so I'm just going to hit 2 points real quick. Let's just assume that these are not actively a disinformation campaign to shut that down. Let's just assume that it is partisan. Well, I'll tell you what, Twitch is probably screwing up because conservative media makes a fuck ton of money. So if Twitch doesn't want to have the money, then, I mean, they can piss in their own shoes. And I'll leave it with that. When it comes to actually dealing with misinformation yourself, one of the big things that I just preach is personal responsibility. You'll notice that I talked a lot less during this particular topic than I did the original first topic, because I know a lot about the first topic and I feel confident in talking about it. This second one, it's a little bit all over the place and it went at a lot of different ways that I didn't feel like I could really follow in on. So I largely sit back, I shut up, I let people who felt more confident talk about it. You can do that too, and I thoroughly encourage each and every person who, whether you are on panel or in the chat, to do so as well. I don't know is not a sin.
Okay, so now I have a few things to say. The first thing I have to say is that I want to announce an event that I'm going to be hosting with collaboration with Modern Day Debates. I will be hosting a debate with Destiny and Adam Something versus Caleb Maupin and Justice, who is a Russian influencer, over, again, the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Right now, the date we're looking for is the 21st of this month, but it's kind of up in the air exactly when it's going to happen. So again, that is me and James of Modern Day Debates hosting a debate between Caleb Maupin and Justice, who is a Russian influencer, versus Destiny and Adam Something. It is sure to be an interesting debate, to say the least. I would also like to say that the next HDC event is being planned towards the end of this month or the first of next month. We are planning it. We are considering a few options, but the most likely option at this point is a Rumble or a small card for that one. A card means like different matches all in one event, like the HDC Mania event. And of course, again, tonight's debate is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Used code DBTV to get 82% off and 3 months free. Now we're going to go into the last topic of the night. And the last topic of the night is pretty self-explanatory. I'll just read it out quick. It is, should the GOP remove fringe candidates like Boebert and MTG from the Republican Party? Let me repeat the question. Should the GOP remove fringe candidates like Boebert and MTG from the party? Loner has also just finished a sentence, so he would be released from mute jail. Congratulations. I'm not a prison abolitionist. You went into a private Discord prison, run by a brutal private prison company. Okay, Mythic, you had a question?
Oh no, I had something for that. No, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, then we're gonna go into this topic. We're gonna start in the top left-hand corner with Sparky.
Of course, they shouldn't be forced to remove from the GOP. You want to call them fringe or duly elected representatives? I think the premise itself is kind of ridiculous. It's just like saying, should we get rid of Ilhan Omar, AOC, Tlaib, the entire freaking squad because they're fringe and they're not the establishment Democrats? No, I think that's stupid. Look, these are duly elected representatives. You can like them, love them, you can hate them. It doesn't matter. They were elected by their constituents. You can either beat them on the field of the with the election, or you can just get used to them. Americans have this tendency to tend to vote in people that they want. And, well, I mean, look, they're duly elected. So suck it up, Buttercup. And by the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene has done a wonderful deal by almost completely ending roll call votes in Congress because she got kicked off of her what are they? The committees and stuff. So I think that's a great thing because now we're forcing our representatives to actually put their name down and vote for each individual bill. Our representative democracy is supposed to be, our constitutional republic is supposed to be slow and arduous. That is the way Congress is supposed to be. And you know what? I'll tip my hat to her. Good for her.
Okay, are you going to respond to Parker's question, or do you want to move on? Because this is the last opportunity you'll have to respond.
What was the question? I'm sorry. Oh yeah, I put it in the side chat. I put it in the
I'll find it.
Yeah.
Okay, going over to Fabian.
Yeah, so before I get into this topic, I just want to say, fuck the GOP. I don't really care about them. They're a bunch of neocon corporate shills that promise low taxes and give us 2% lower taxes and just as much spending as Democrats. So we get debt no matter who we fucking vote for. We get wars no matter who we vote for. And they supposedly promise deregulation. And what we get is new forms of regulation that helps out their corporate buddies. That being said, we're talking about Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. What I find really interesting and weird about this is that the left doesn't like them because they're right-wing populists. And I want to make a call to the left and say right-wing populism isn't as bad as you think. And the reason I say that is because populism as an ideology is very simple, right? There are the elites and then there are the people, and everything that I don't like is the elites, and everything that we do like is, the people, et cetera, et cetera. But what populism really represents is it represents, and it has throughout history, an awakening of people realizing that the entire system is bullshit. And I think this is a great opportunity to progressives, to socialists, to communists, to anarchists, to libertarians, to constitutional conservatives, all of them that have been preaching that this system is bullshit, and to see that these are converts ready to accept things. And so, should the GOP get rid of these two people? If they know what's good for them, probably. But the fact of the matter is that I think it's already too late. I think if you look at politics right now, there's already an awakening on the right wing in Western liberal democracies, and these are the canaries in the coal mine of right wing populism to a movement that's gonna be something. I don't know what it is yet because you never can really predict what populism will turn into, but it will definitely be monumental.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Sprout.
All right. So, I may not always agree with what Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene say. I don't live in their district. I didn't vote for them. The people who live in their district voted for them. They voted for them to go into Congress, and they got to Congress. Should they be removed for the party? No. And to any Democrats that say they should, then I'm going to ask you if you're willing to remove AOC. Are you willing to remove Ilhan Omar? I can pull up plenty of things as to why you should remove these people, including Ilhan Omar referring to 9/11 as something happened. All right. So we can go as far down this road as you want to, but when we're talking about fringe candidates and you want us to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, but aren't willing to talk about AOC and Ilhan Omar, seems a little biased to me. So no, I may not always agree with what they say, but they were elected by their district and they were duly elected. So they should remain in Congress. They should remain in their party, and until they're beaten an election, they're gonna have another election come soon, and let's see how that election turns out. And that's the way to kick somebody out of Congress.
Can I ask you a question, Sprout?
Yeah.
What do you think happened on 9/11?
I think that terrorists got into an airplane and smashed into the Twin Towers.
So something did happen.
But to reduce it to that is extremely disrespectful to actually what happened. To reduce it to somebody did something.
So did something happen?
A horrific event happened.
I'm just
This should not be reduced to something.
I'm just fucking with you.
Are
Loner
they
box.
releasing language?
Loner box.
Yeah, I guess like one of the to name one problem with like right wing populism is it seems to put you in this very reducing it to elites and the people, which puts you in a very kind of like comfortable zone where like you get to come up with phrases like left wing neoliberals, where apparently centrist Democrats, Joe Biden, the Justice Democrats, Antifa, George Soros, the CEOs of Twitter, socialists, tanky socialists all get to fall under the same umbrella. It's very convenient where like everything you don't like comes from like the same group. I don't know. But when it comes to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Laura Boebert, I don't know how it works in the US. So, I mean, in the UK, it's actually quite like people will deselect MPs to make political points. I don't know if they should really do that. I mean, they're elected, but it's definitely in their interest to distance themselves from those two people as much as possible, right? Because I think Republicans are starting to learn that Black and other ethnic minority voters are a lot more right-leaning than people expected. The thing that puts them off the Republican Party is that they associate the Republican Party with racism. And I feel like Marjorie Taylor Greene and I don't know much about Boebert, but I imagine the two of them have like quite a bit to do with that.
Mythic.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And first of all, the precedent that would be set by removing, I don't know by what, I guess it's censure, or I guess it would be by other mechanisms, indicting them. What the fuck is it called when you get a president out of there? The term is escaping me. I have panel brain right now. Impeach. Thank you so much. When they could be impeached and removed from their seats, I think that would set a dangerous precedent for any politician that becomes volatile, becomes polarizing. I don't think that's a good precedent that we should set forth. I think that they could, if they're toxic, if they're whatever, you pull them off of committees and you don't do anything. But I 100% agree with Lonerbox. Marjorie Taylor Greene and politicians of that ilk, Lauren Boebert, are just they're part of a schizoid duopoly where people don't feel like they're represented, so they go for these weirdo populist type conspiracy type people espousing populist rhetoric just out of frustration, and they appeal to the everyman in a way that the actual the bean counters and the neolibs don't. So there's always going to be a lane for that in politics. I think it's interesting right now in the duopoly. That means that they have to be absorbed into a big, otherwise semi-rational political apparatus instead of like a fringe third party, a minority third party. But my official take is I think they're fucking morons and it's hilarious. And just for lulz, they should be kept on.
Parker?
I completely agree with Lonerbox and Mythic. I definitely think that they, like, as advice, like, they probably should distance themselves from those two candidates, but obviously they were elected, so I think the best way to get it out was if those specific districts did that, so I wouldn't, like, say force kick them out or whatnot.
Stardust?
Yep. So, I guess in response to what Scott was saying, MTG isn't a populist. She's a dumb fuck idiot who believes in Jewish space lasers. So that being said, the question is whether the GOP should find other people to take their places. if I were the GOP, I probably would. But I also think it's hilarious that they're willing to tank their public image for one person who believes that there are Jewish space lasers and another person who has suggested another congresswoman is a terrorist. Yeah.
And Tiberius.
Sorry, had to unmute there. Okay, so the long story short here is that I thoroughly encourage both parties to distance themselves from the radical wings of their parties. I'm not a centrist by any measure, but on the other side of that is that I do believe in the power of disassociation to say, you know what, we're not these people and we don't support what they do. That's not us. Yeah, I actually am I am fully in favor of distancing the Republican Party from MTG and Lauren Boebert. MTG, I'm tired of hearing about the space laser memes because they're real. She keeps talking about them. She keeps thinking that this is real. And as a Republican, I don't want to be associated in any way, shape, or form. I think it degrades the party. Boebert, I respect her radical commitment to 2A, but when you're taking photos with your kids and you gave them an AR-15 and the gun's bigger than them, it doesn't make you look like a sane, decent parent. It makes you look like a gun. So fuck this person. On the other side of that is that, you know what? I think one of the worst things the Democratic Party ever did was make it where their super delegates don't get a vote until like the third round. I loved what they did in 2016, where they're like, you know what? That Bernie Sanders guy, he's not a real Democrat. He's a hanger-on. We're going to put up Hillary because that's the person we want. Whether you like it or not, whether it's about the law or she lost, is that the Democrats should be able to say who is worthy of being a party member, and so should the Republicans. And I would very much, I very much encourage both parties to actually grow a pair and fucking say, we like these people and we don't like these people and we will not associate.
Okay. And with that, does anybody want to start us off? This will be probably our shortest topic of the night, seeing as I don't want to go past midnight.
Yeah, I'll start us off. So, I'm not saying the Republican Party has to put them on committees. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that they don't deserve to be kicked out of the parties. They don't deserve to lose their seat. They're duly elected representatives. And the funny thing is, it seems to be the people who voted Democrat here are all for the Republican Party distancing themselves from these people, but don't even look at distancing themselves from the fringe candidates that they have, from AOC and Ilhan Omar. In fact, they're embraced with open arms. And so it's kind of hilarious to watch this happen. I'm not saying the Democratic Party should distance themselves from AOC and Ilhan Omar. I'm not a Democrat. You guys do what you want. But I'm also sitting here saying you guys are telling us what to do, but you guys aren't looking in the mirror and realizing, oh shit, we have the same exact problem. So I don't know, maybe look in the mirror and realize you have the same exact problem, realize it's the same on both sides, and then maybe understand that, oh, okay, so if we're going to do this, then we should do this too. So, I don't know.
Sprout,
Wait, what do you
I
mean it's
don't
the
think-
same on both sides?
Huh?
What do you mean it's the same on both sides? Are you
Ilhan
comparing like
Omar-
MTG and them to like the
comparing
squad?
I'm comparing MTG and Boebert to Ilhan Omar and AOC.
How can you make that
Ilhan Omar
comparison?
is an open anti-Semite. So yeah, there
Yeah,
you go.
Ilhan Omar is an anti-Semite.
How is she an anti-Semite? Just out of interest.
Yeah.
Are
I'm
you
talking as an
kidding?
outsider. You
Anti-Semite?
can
Well,
tell me.
let's look it up. We'll look it up. We'll look up all the
So-
examples. Do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
And go piece by piece.
How about the Benjamins,
I
right?
mean, if you make
Yeah,
it, like,
no, we
Ilhan-
know how
Ilhan
she
Omar-
protests her anti-Semitism. and stuff like
Ilhan,
that.
I mean, like, I fucking hate all politicians, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure I have a dog in this fight. But Ilhan Omar has done a couple of things that are sus. She makes comments from time to time, and I think more often than not they get taken out of context. But one of the things that she did was when she was in Michigan, in the state senate, I believe, she was like one of two people that voted, that refused to vote for a bill that would, that did vote for a bill that would give insurance claims to terrorists' families, so that they could use their life insurance policy even if they committed acts of terrorism. Like, she's done some pretty spicy shit. And whether or not you agree with that politically, right, it's definitely representative of someone that is on the fringe of what you might consider like a normal Democrat, right? And I think that's like a fair point to say, like, hey, this person is not necessarily representative of the DNC's platform.
Oh, okay. Well, then you
I just
acknowledge
want to
that the
ask you
squad
about
is just different than them too. Like, you would say that it's just different orders of magnitude, right?
I mean, I
So-
started this off with.
I mean,
fuck
you've already
the
mentioned the
GOP.
thing about insurance claims for terrorists, but I think wasn't it? I'm just cursory glancing. I could be wrong. It was suspected terrorists, wasn't it?
I'd have to look at the
sorry?
bill again. It's been a long time since I talked about it because
Yeah, I mean
didn't-
it says beneficiaries of suspected terrorists, which but a lot of people get wrongfully suspected of terrorism.
Yeah,
Or
again, like I said, like
counterterrorism thing.
but again, it wasn't. It's not. It's not a matter of whether or not she was right or wrong. I'm not making a claim about what is right and wrong. I'm saying that like she has done things that were in terms of her voting record that were wild things that might be widely supported by the Democrats. Right? She would vote against them because she's very clearly further left or further on
Mhm.
some issues than the DNC. So if the question, if
Okay.
the regards to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert are about their ideas and not necessarily about their behavior, at least in terms of their ideas being fringe or different, you could make the same one-to-one comparison about other progressive Democrats just as easily as you could about like America First populist Republican candidates or
Well, I'm
senators or House Representative members.
and
I'm just
where
going to
the
ask you about this
difference is-
specific one, though, because I think the amendment, which Ilhan was against, was that the amendment would mean that it doesn't require a terrorist conviction in order to limit payments. So basically, they didn't need a conviction to have their payments limited, and that's what Ilhan Omar was against. I don't think that's sussy at all, is it? It might be unpopular.
support
For,
the
No, I
insurance
literally
law?
agree with her on that. It was just that like
so why did you use an example of her being sussy?
I'm not using it as an example of being her sussy. I know that you're stuck in such a narrative that it's always like team A, team B, but I started this off with fuck the GOP. And if I need you to hear this the other way, fuck Labor Party and fuck Democrats too.
But
All
you're
the
comparing
arguments we've
them.
made have
I
been about
appreciate all that.
Boebert
I'm just-
and
I'm
Wait,
not-
wait,
I'm
wait,
not-
wait,
that's not-
wait. Okay, 1 second. There was it was a lot of people talking at the same time. I'm gonna throw it to Star, who hasn't talked during this topic yet. Star.
I feel like a lot of the arguments, at least that I made, and it may just be just an oversight on my end, but a lot of the arguments that I made regarding this were about the specifically very outrageous things that have been said by both of these candidates. If there are equally outrageous things and equally like really bad public image things that have happened, from other candidates, sure, but I am just talking from a public image standpoint. I have never seen two people who have just absolutely fumbled so badly. So
I also just think it's like because I asked for I acknowledged, Fabian, that you're not like a Republican, whatever. I acknowledge that. It's just that I asked for an example of Ilhan Omar's anti-Semitism, and that was the first example. It didn't fly to me. It doesn't seem to fly to you either. I just want to see if there are any others, because I mean, we know from Boebert there was the Jihad Squad. So I mean, okay, where's I need the equivalent to that.
or the implication,
I mean,
her
that's just-
implying that Ilhan Omar would blow up like an escalator or something. Was it?
That's
an
what he just
escalator?
said. He said the Jihad Squad. It was a joke she told, and she didn't know she was on camera, and people got really mad about it. And
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to know where the
Okay.
that's what I want. I want the equivalent of that coming from Ilhan Omar. Something
It's
that you
all
can
about
think
the
is achievable.
Benjamins. It's all about the
Okay.
Benjamins.
What is all?
Omar's-
Wait,
so
you can't just say it's all about the Benjamins. You said that twice.
So
Come
it's referring to a tweet that she said in response to something Israel was doing, and she retorted with, "It's all about the Benjamins. It is a trope. It is a Jewish trope. Look, it's you can make excuse for it all
Saying
you
follow
want. She
the
has
money?
apologized. No.
It's
Well,
a double
America's-
entendre, though. You're comparing a double entendre to Jihad
Yeah.
Squad, which is
Okay.
unambiguous.
Give me 1 second. So
That is laser
in the-
focused.
in-
you would
in
need a
the
lot more
midst-
to back that up, Eric Rossberg.
So-
Yeah, like-
Almost like
Omar
Jewish
was
space
laser
laser.
focused on-
Okay,
Give me
okay,
one
okay,
second,
stop. Okay,
guys.
stop.
Give
Okay,
me
guys.
1
Stop.
second.
Everybody, shut the fuck up. Okay, I can't hear myself think. You're all talking at the same time.
She's apologized for this shit before.
Okay, got you. A Sprouticus. Sorry.
Yeah, so Omar said on Twitter, if you want to hear something absolutely horrific, she said on Twitter, Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel.
True.
That was on Twitter.
Anti-Semite.
Is Israel representative of?
themselves.
I'm not trying to like split hairs here, but is Israel representative of all Jews?
It is the Jewish state of
Israel is a Jewish state.
That's not what we asked, though, right? Is it? Are they
Israel
representative
is
of like?
Israel is the only Jewish state.
Okay, but you realize like lots of Jews oppose the state of Israel because of like what they do, right? So
The majority of American ones.
Wait. So it's okay to be anti-Semitic as long as other Jews believe. As long as
Wait,
other
well, how
Jews
is it
believe.
anti-Semitic?
conflating
No,
That's
you're-
my
you have to
question.
show
Stop,
where
stop,
the
stop,
anti-Semitism
stop,
is.
stop. Y'all yelling
I've got
over
a
each other.
Jewish friend.
Yep. Good for you, Sparky. Okay. Sorry. I heard something that I thought was bigoted, so I immediately just threw it at Sparky. Reflex.
Yeah, fuck you, Dylan. That's fucked up, man. I have never said
fine.
anything
It's
racist or
the
anything
same.
on your fucking channel or even mine.
It's the same
Hey, you just
argument. It's the same
automatic-
argument.
Wait.
It's the same
Sparky. You famously put a gun to your head after you said, "Hey, if I had to have sex with trans people," and you took an actual gun, put it to your head on stream, and said, "This is if I had to have sex with trans people." Don't pretend you've never said anything that could be construed as bigoted before. Okay.
Fuck off, Dylan.
Okay, that's your response. Got it. Okay, Sprout, you were saying something. I just want to make sure you get to finish your point. I'll write
So,
down
yeah.
Stardust and Fabian.
I'm saying it's the same argument when you say that there's other people who are Jewish that are against Israel. It's the same argument. I have a Jewish friend. It's the exact same argument. This is anti-Semitic at its core, and I will quote it again just in case you didn't hear it right the first time.
I'm reading
Israel
it right now. It's okay. Like,
Israel
on my
has
screen as well.
hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. If that's not anti-Semitic, I'm gonna need you to point out something that is.
What did she say after? She
Are
said
they
Gaza,
talking about the
Palestine, and
government
Israel.
or the people?
She said Gaza, Palestine, Israel. She's talking about the actions of the Israeli government.
Yes,
which
like you're
have
conflating
been described as war
anti-Semitism
crimes.
with
So,
anti-Zionism.
State of Israel, yeah, anti-Zionism is
She
not
was
anti-Semitism.
This quote was in her tweet and it hypnotized the world. So you're saying that that's not about Jewish people? Israel has hypnotized the world? No,
Israel,
not about Jewish
state
people.
of Israel.
The state of
It
Israel.
involves
Yeah.
So
Jewish
you're
people. It is not a
separating-
direct
you're
attack
separating-
at the faith of Judaism. That's a different
To
In
thing.
fact-
separate the government from the people. Is that crazy of a concept?
You do know
No,
that is actually a Jewish
it's not an
trope, right?
insane. It's not an insane concept. What I am saying is that Israel has hypnotized the world. A huge part of anti-Semitism is that the Jews run the world. So you're sitting here and telling me that saying that Israel hypnotized the world isn't anti-Semitic?
No,
they're
because
talking
if I
when she
think-
talks about
specifically
hypnotizing the world, when she talks about
versus the people,
hypnotizing
there's
the
a
world,
difference.
Okay, please, one person at a time. I didn't get to hear anything. Stardust, could you say what you said?
yeah, okay. When she talks about hypnotizing the world, I think she's specifically talking about the governments of other nations, right?
Okay. If that's not enough for you, right? So Glenn Greenwald said, equating Omar and Tlaib's criticism to Israel to Steve King's law in defense of white supremacy is obscene. In the U.S., we're allowed to criticize our own government, certainly foreign governments. The GOP House leaders' priorities are warped. In response to Greenwald's post, Ilhan Omar tweeted, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby."
Okay.
Okay.
Look,
Yeah,
she
because,
talks in
because there's a lot of
anti-Semitic
financial
tropes.
interest between
Hey,
America and
stop.
Israel.
You
My
can't
turn.
accept
Okay.
that.
So, sorry.
It was your turn earlier.
Didn't Sparky
Sparky,
say that earlier?
you were trying to say something?
Look, she talks in
Fabian, I see you.
anti-Semitic tropes. If you can't comprehend that, maybe that's a blind spot for you. I grew up being called those kind of things. It's okay, man. I don't really care. It doesn't hurt me. But yeah, no, they talk in tropes all the time. And if it was anyone else, you would be bending over backwards to try to cancel them. Fuck right off. This is so stupid. My God.
This is actually what I think what I've demonstrated here. Despite MTG saying Jewish space lasers, I'm just saying from a public image perspective.
And
Wait a
I'm
minute.
saying not to cancel any
Let me
of them.
finish. Let me finish. Okay. Other people talk here. Okay. So, despite her saying Jewish space lasers, I'm saying that's hilarious. If they want to keep her there, then they can keep her there. If from a public image perspective, I would maybe take her off. However, when it's this Ilhan Omar, I'm sure she said things that are like and you know I don't agree with her on everything either, but I don't think her criticizing Israel as a state is necessarily indicative of her being anti-Semitic. If I criticize like Modi from India, does that mean that I'm like being racist against Indian people? I don't think so, right? If I'm criticizing the Indian government for having tons of corruption in it, I don't think I'm calling like the entire nation or being racist against all those people. She's specifically talking about like or at least from what I can tell, she's talking about the state of Israel, the government, and how they've interacted with the rest of the world.
Okay, so I mean, to go
Okay.
further into this, if you want to go further into
but
this,
but
we can do
Sprout,
that.
when you finish, I want to make sure that people know that Fabian's been waiting a while, so I want to make sure Fabian gets to talk. I got other people on the list too,
Okay.
like Ty. Okay. And
Okay, this will be
Parker.
this will be the last part. So if we want to go further into this, right? So we can keep going down this rabbit hole since it's not wanted to be considered anti-Semitism. All right. So when asked to explain by a reporter where the money she was referring to came from, Omar retweeted AIPAC, and Omar's spokesman said the tweets speak for themselves. So, I mean, again, if that's not anti-Semitism, please inform me on what is, because I am drastically off.
Are they talking about the people or the government?
So
Again,
I'm
we need to be
unclear.
clear about
Are
this
you-
before
okay.
we have this
really,
conversation.
I'm just
right?
gonna.
Okay, so let me wait 1 second. I just want to clarify for Chad. AIPIC is a pro-Israel PAC active in the United States, because a lot of people don't know what that is. Okay, Fabian.
Yeah, they say wild shit like we could have any politician. I can write something on a napkin and they'll do it. It's pretty funny.
Sprout, was that an
the thing-
anti-Semitic trope just there? Sorry.
Oh, I'll make anti-Semitic jokes. I don't give a fuck. I'll make jokes about everybody.
Do it.
But anyways, well, I guess we'll do that one.
Don't, Fabian, please, for the love of God, don't do that on my stream again, or I'm gonna kick you. Okay?
Sorry, I just had some hand lotion. I had to get it in my hands.
Don't bullshit. me.
Anyways, so no, what I'm saying here is I think what we really have here, and this is something I'm kind of stealing from Dave Smith, is a hierarchy of like offense problem. Like you have a bunch of left-wingers on this debate topic, right? Doing what they can to defend the squad, right? And then you have right-wingers being like, she's an anti-Semite, as like a distraction from the fucked up shit Marjorie Taylor Greene says, right? And they say some hilarious shit from time to time, and then they say some crazy shit. And again, I think we're losing the forest through the trees, right? Who gives a fuck about some bad joke from Marjorie Taylor Greene or Boebert or Ilhan Omar when like we're literally involved in wars? Like we're bombing children and nobody gives a fuck about this shit. Like children are pissing and shitting themselves to death in Yemen and we're not doing shit about it. And in fact, we're helping make it worse. Right? Like our tax dollars, because of the Ukraine situation, we just passed a $1.5 trillion spending bill full of fucking pork for Democrats and Republicans. It's like 7% higher than the budget from last year, despite the fact that we have inflation occurring. Right. And instead we argue back and forth about like, oh, this person's fringe or this. You should be seeing that the reason these people exist is because this fucking system isn't working for a lot of people and people are starting to wake up. That's why Bernie Sanders was popular. That's why left-wing populism was on the rise. And that's why right-wing populism is on the rise. And what we should be doing is trying to talk to those people and bring them into constructive places of ideologies that are better, like libertarianism.
Yeah, broadly speaking, when we're talking about the first of all, I don't understand what this panel is doing now. Are we talking about reasons why Ilhan Omar and Lauren Bourbon MTG should be removed? Because that's what it sounds like we're doing. Sounds like we're contextualizing. Yes, this other person is just as bad. So, but they should both stay. So I don't understand what the purpose is. But to differentiate between the two broadly, one person making what could be described uncharitably as an anti-Semitic joke, or maybe one with more dog whistles attached to it, is different than the line of commentary that Lauren Boebert and MTJ trafficking, specifically Boebert, says that Omar and other politicians are full-time propagandists for state-sponsored terrorism. They said they were politicians with suicide belts strapped to their body. On another date, she called them a full-time propagandist for Hamas. Later on, she said that Rashida Tlaib and Omar need to register as foreign agents. On June 8th, she called Representative Omar an honorary member of Hamas. And then at a later time, again, called them terrorist sympathizers. So it's a part of a thing preying upon Muslim tropes or anti-Muslim rhetoric in the United States, which has been on the rise since after 9/11. The type of anti-Semitism in America has been changed after 9/11, where after which we sort of sided where the Republicans who were previously more prone to say anti-Semitic stuff has then realigned with Israel as a sort of 51st state for the United States. So that the type of anti-Semitism has changed. So those comments aren't as pertinent as the anti-Muslim ones, which are in vein of the very real animus that Muslim people in America face, especially in the context of like the Muslim ban and other stuff like that. So,
So I'm
it's
gonna
not
ask-
it's not tit for tat.
I'm gonna ask you a question. All right. So who is running Palestine right now?
Like which part? Like the West Bank or the Gaza Strip?
The Gaza Strip. Who's running the Gaza Strip?
So that's a part of Palestine, right? Not all of Palestine.
Okay. It's the majority that's attacking Israel. So who's running the Gaza Strip?
Gaza Strip is run by Hamas, isn't it?
Mm. And which congresswoman supports Palestine in their efforts against Israel?
Well, isn't it more like the liberation of the Palestinian people? Like, there's a very clear aim with being pro-Palestine is different from being
no,
pro-Israel.
so-
I'm pro-Palestine. Am I Hamas?
Yeah, like
Omar has specifically said that she wants Palestine to rule the entire area.
She wants death to the Israeli state. She doesn't want the Jewish state to exist.
so.
Wait, the
So-
Israel
Is-
state. So you just admitted that it's about this government, right? The state of
She's
Israel.
The Jewish
pro-Palestine.
state.
They said the Jewish state. That's
would
not what
like-
they said.
I would
I
like
would like
the
a
death of
citation
all
for that.
states.
You guys are just openly. If Donald Trump said something as crazy as this, you guys would be flipping over backwards trying to say impeach him because he said this. But when it's one of your own people, it's like, oh God, we need to come up with any excuse we can as to
Are you really going to
why
use that?
that
to, like,
wasn't
just,
exactly.
Can I just
like,
say I would not
we're
impeach
not
him?
talking about the
Stop,
government, like,
stop.
You're
Stop,
using this to
stop,
derail the
stop.
conversation.
We're all talking at the same time, okay? Tiberius has been waiting, so I'm gonna throw it over to Tiberius.
Appreciate it. Had to unmute again. So there's a level here where I can pick straws, but the problem is I really don't want to. There's a lot of unsavory characters within American politics, and the will to disown anybody for almost any reason is just not there. Like we have censures, but we censure our own party for not towing the line. We can talk about the Democrats hitting cinema, whether you like that or not. Like literally, it is more authoritarian in the regards that we're hitting people for not speaking their mind, but we're actually hitting people for just not falling out with an agenda. That actually is very concerning for me because the way that MTG goes about doing certain things, the way that Ilya and Omar goes about doing certain things, I can say that maybe they're just idiots. I can say that maybe I can make some excuse for them in this way or the other. Excuse me. I cannot talk today. But here's the reality. At what point do you just get to say, hey, I don't like being associated with it. As a Republican or as a Democrat, I don't approve of this. I don't want to be associated with this. There's power in that. There really is. And the fact that either political party is refusing to do that in any kind of way, except for like a rare circumstances, is very concerning to me overall. The one thing that I actually have to agree with Scott on is that populism's on the rise. We're going to have to accept that there's going to be even more fucking idiots and even more people that are going to say cringe shit or ideological stuff that doesn't really make sense in the real world. And we have to figure out how to handle that because the American people are not happy. And we need to channel that into something constructive because these people are how you get actual fascists and actual communists into power. We have to be very careful of who we're dealing with them and how we're dealing.
There's almost no differentiation between the Republicans and Democrats now in effective policy. The only differences are certain fucking wedge issues. So people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert are going to become the norm. They're going to be people who rile up and exacerbate people along moral calamities and stuff like that. They're going to go every novel conspiracy theory is now going to launch a new politician. That's the wave now. That's what it's going to be. So I think that it's just like, unless we have a parliamentary system, proportional representation, get rid of the electoral college, and admit that there's a wider spectrum of political thought that is not being served by the duopoly, dealing with these people in the two-party system is going to become the norm, and there's going to be way more of them coming. They're very popular, and they're gaffe machines. It just works in the comment as content policy setting in the Twitter sphere. It just works right now. So they're gonna be an inevitability.
Destroy the two-party system tomorrow. I don't
No,
care.
fuck
That's
this.
good.
No. Like, you have me on the first part, the second part just kills me. Like, what we have seen throughout parliamentary systems, STV voting and whatnot, is that it is an open platform to basically metabolize your extremists. You will see a radical right-wing party and a radical left-wing party if you get rid of the two-party system.
Yeah, you
Fuck
would.
that shit.
You would.
No, I don't really want to see the David Duke party. No, thank you. I will happily.
You just want them as Republicans. You just want the David
no,
Duke.
I don't want. No, I want them to not have a.
Republicans.
No, I don't want them to
David
have
Duke
a
was
home.
a Democrat for a portion too, there, pal.
Okay,
I
well.
I don't give a shit about that. No, I
True.
don't want extremists to have a fucking voice. That's what I don't.
They do. They always
Yeah, they
will.
have one, and the reason why they do is not because the political system is platforming them as much as it is what they are saying is resonating with people because the system's kind of fucked up. It's kind of
True.
broken, right? So
agree.
we need people who are competent, who are sensible to actually make effective changes, and we're not going to do that when we keep seeing both of our parties keep caressing to the most radical fucking elements because they don't know what they're doing. They don't understand a fucking thing 90% of the time. They're just angry and they're pissed off and they're saying the things that their voters want them to say, but it's not constructive. It is destructive.
The best way to walk back from something, say de-align from them, right? The best way to de-align is to allow their little 2-3% party that's like a nothing burger just be a separate thing that they can form a coalition with on a certain thing in a much broader in a very definitive way. A parliamentary system would allow them to de-brainworm the Democrats, who would then properly the Republicans would effectively then become the neoliberals. The weirdo ethno-state people would become their own little minority, like a Christian right type of party. And you're right, there would be a little commie party. There would be, but me as a communist, I think that's kind of based. So
okay,
Well,
so we got to wrap up because we're going on 11:30, and Tiberius has a commitment, I assume. And so I want to throw it to Tiberius to be the first person to do outro and shout yourself out. Please remember to do that.
Yeah, appreciate it. So, there's a level where I'm a little bit biased. I'm far more of an institutionalist. I'm far more, when I say Republican, while I do believe in the Republican Party, I also believe in Republican ideals. Is that I want a more elite class of people who is my elected representatives making decisions, not just the common body politic, because I know way too many people who can't point out Ukraine on a map, and that really bothers me. So overall, at least when it comes down to this particular conversation, I don't like the idea of platforming extremists with something like STV or with destroying the two-party system through a number of measures, because I've seen what that does in Europe, and while in some regards it helps, and it will probably go more toward your favor, being more of a left-wing radical for yourself, the United States has always leaned a lot more right-wing radical in its history, and I think a lot of people who are in your shoes really underestimate the power of the radical right to actually galvanize when given a proper platform. And that is something I'm actually very if you are interested in what I had to say, or you want to chat with me more, my DMs are open. And yeah, you can find me at Tiberius D on Twitch and YouTube. You can help support me on Patreon, all those wonderful things. And you can check me and Counterpoints and a few other people out on the Mascot Podcast on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Standard Time. It is so good to see so many of you once again. Star, Scott, great to see you. Sprout, welcome back from your deployment. Dylan, thank you for having me on. And unfortunately, I'm out of time, so you guys have a great time, and we'll see you next time.
See you later, Tiberius. I got to throw it now over to Stardust for outros.
Yeah. So I agree with a lot of what Tiberius was just saying. I don't know that it's great for us to have extremists forming, I guess, organizing in a way that they can get more power. I feel, especially when those extremists are people who believe in Jewish space lasers, or people who could quite literally be like, I don't know, like I don't like the idea of that. I do think that we should be able to distance ourselves from the more extreme people in our parties, and I'll very happily do that as a more left-leaning person. But as far as it goes with MTG and Boebert, I mean, I'm not the GOP, but if I were the GOP, I would be distancing myself from them. So.
Okay, I'm now going to throw it over to Parker. And Stardust, I guess people can go check you out at twitch.tv/Hasanabi.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, twitch.tv/Stardust. Thank you.
Wonderful. Parker.
So I do think there's a valid concern to think that a far right party would be at least insightful to happen or could be incited if we had a multi-party system here in the United States. But I think there's a huge issue with a lack of representation amongst the broad general public, that a two-party system does not actually give us the right capabilities in order to make sure everyone is represented. So I think a multi-party system and definitely a parliamentary system would be more beneficial in allowing for people to be represented and disallowing for people to fall to things like QAnon or far-right conspiracies because they don't actually have like solutions to the problems that exist and impact their daily lives. So I mean, I guess I'll just like say that. But you can find me on TikTok at Parker COL, Parker Cole, or on YouTube at Parker Sedgwick. It was great to be on. Thank you so much for having me. I hope everyone has a great night.
Happy to have you back. I'm now going to throw it over to Mythic.
Hey, yes, I'm Mythic Politics Everywhere. Thank you so much, political commentator. I'm writing a book on political conspiracies. I'm on a panel tomorrow. What is it? Shit Show 2.0 on political violence and if it's ever warranted. Thank you. Follow me everywhere. I appreciate it. Thank you to Dylan for having me on here. And then just probably to put a cap in that thing, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene and Boebert are objectively hilarious. I think it's very funny. I think it's very good for people like Lonerbox said. With the onboarding of so many, with the realization now that there's a lot of socially conservative, a new American citizenry in the form of like Chicano people and Tejano people in America, and especially like Cubans and stuff like that, there's going to be more of a vein of people who are minority but conservative. And as a countervailing effort, looking at the buffoonery of MTG and Lauren Boebert is a countervailing effort, I think. And plus, I think it's just going to be very interesting. We're going to go more populist. We're going to have more nuts. We're going to have more people who are, each new conspiracy trope is going to birth a new politician. I think we have that to look forward to. I think it's going to be objectively hilarious, and I look forward to laughing about it.
Okay. Now I'm going to throw it over to Lonerbox.
Yeah, I've seen quite a lot of like what they call like left-wing anti-Semitism, like in my own country. I know the way it works. Like there's a broad pattern of behavior, and like there are buzzwords, there is rhetoric, like dark money, the Israel lobby, and all that stuff. And yeah, maybe you can definitely make the argument that Ilhan Omar has been clumsy with her rhetoric. But at the end of the day, like when it comes to the Republican Party, they're the ones who, although Black and ethnic minority groups tend to lean towards them for most political issues, they don't go to the party because of racism. Whether you think that racism is real or not, tends to be their reason. Whereas the majority of Jewish people in America still vote Democrats, despite the presence of Ilhan Omar. Like they understand. Yeah, so I think when it comes to, I'm not telling anyone what to do. I just think in the Republican Party's interest, the Democrats don't seem to need to worry about this because Biden got quite a lot of votes in the last election. It seems to be like the Republicans are the ones who are struggling for more votes. So I think a good tactic would be pull on those ethnic minority conservatives and get rid of the crazy Jewish space laser clowns. But whatever.
Okay, gonna throw it over to Sprout.
So, I am going to essentially say that actually, I'm going to say this right now just to make sure people know. I'm not for MTG being kicked out of the party, kicked out of office. I'm not for Boebert being kicked out of party, kicked out of office, and the same thing for AOC and Ilhan Omar. I'm just simply pointing out hypocrisy that I see from the left, where they're willing to tell us that they need to be kicked out of the party, they need to be kicked out of office because of this, that, and the other. But then when they look at that from their own party, they all of a sudden go, no, 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 you're misunderstanding what's going on. And so that was the response I expected, and that was the response I got. But with that being said, you can find me at twitch.tv/thesprouticus, twitter.com/thesprouticus. I will also be seeing Mythic Politics again tomorrow on the Shit Show 2.0. So look forward to seeing you there. But yeah, guys, come check me out. And if you hate me, come give me a sub.
What panel is this? The what?
The Shit Show 2.0.
Whose is this?
It's
Don't know. I was
Queen.
invited
It's
to
Queen.
it.
You don't even know whose it is? Oh,
It's Queen
Nope.
Alexa.
I've monopoly. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I've built too strong of a monopoly. I don't even know what's going on in the backyard mud wrestling shows anymore. Gonna now throw it over to Sparky.
Look, you don't have to like them. You don't have to hate them. Whatever. Look, the people who live in their districts, their constituents, are the ones who determine if they should be there, and that includes either side of the aisle. It doesn't matter. Look, there's people on the Democrats I dislike. There's people in the Republican Party I dislike. Both parties fucking suck. The uniparty needs to be destroyed. I'm all for destroying the two-party system. I want actual conservatives. I don't want some milquetoast, watered down horse shit that we see calling themselves conservatives. And yeah, that means we have to get 6 or 7 different parties. Who cares? But yeah, that's just where I stand. I don't see the point in, oh, we have to morally grandstand over everything, and oh, you've got to kick people out because they said naughty words. Screw them all. Who cares? Leave that to their constituents. It's none of your problem unless you live in that district, and then you should be out actively campaigning for your candidate of choice or run yourself. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it over to Fabian.
All right, so I'm going to do my outro as Alex Jones because I think it's important that you understand what's really happening here. You see, Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, they're canaries in the coal mine. And there's a little flicker, an ember of fire in the hearts of American men and women. We've seen this before. This is the rise of populism. We saw it in the protests against King George. We saw it when the workers and the Wobblies and the Wildcats were fighting in the Gilded Age. We saw it with Martin Van Buren and Andrew Jackson and the Know Nothing Party that formed the Republican Party as populism always shifts to a new form of ideology. You keep continuing with this wokeness brigade and the intelligentsia of the Marxists coming after us with their ideas and creating these new ideas and working with the neoliberals to create these authoritarian measures. Well, I'm telling you right now, these are the actions of greedy little dwarves going deep underground and tinking away, tink, 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 not realizing that they're about to breach into a dragon. And that dragon is that little ember of fire in the American men and women of the right-wing populist party that will turn into a conflagration that will make January 6th and make the BLM riots look like children in a principal's office. I'm Alex Jones, and if you want to see freedom and liberty and good anarcho-capitalist type of content, you need to check out Fabian Liberty, twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty. Out.
Thank you for joining our show, Alex. I can now put featuring Alex Jones in the title, which is going to help me a lot. Anyway, I guess that's everything. You are all free to go. Thank you all for coming for another amazing rendition of the Hippy Dippy Roundtable. See you guys later. Hey, you. Yes, you. Right there. You. I am starting a Patreon. I know you guys have been asking for it on the YouTube crowd for a while, since usually it's just the Twitch people who could support me financially directly, but we're finally making a means for you guys to do so as well. And that's not all. You can support the #1 cyber terrorist, mover and shaker, Vince McMahon of Twitch politics. How? By donating to this Patreon and getting benefits like movie nights, special Discord roles, announcements at the end of the video of how much you have supported this war criminal Dylan Burns TV, and much, much more. Okay, not much more, okay? I only have limited means, but more than that, I can assure you. And if you support the Patreon, you will have my deep-hearted appreciation from the bottoms of my soul that you are truly a mover and shaker. Thanks so much for your Patreon money in advance. I will use it to continue to fund the liberal elitist agenda.